Hi, Chima, can you hear me? All right, I'll just proceed. Good afternoon, everyone from here. Thank you for joining us. This is the second part of our two-part series, the grad school hack, and essentially to just help members of our audience to understand about grad school application and everything in between to securing a job. So just to confirm, we have all our speakers here. But before we go ahead to do that, we'd just like to introduce Caleb Adebayo to just give us an introductory comment. Hi, Caleb, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Just to confirm, we are recording and streaming. Yeah, thank you. There's an echo. I'm not sure where it's from.
You can proceed. I've muted everyone. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and probably good evening, depending on where you're joining from. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the final part of the two-part series of the Grad School Hack, organized by Hanson Bridges. For those who may not know about Hanson Bridges, it is a team of volunteer lawyers enthusiastic about helping the next generation of lawyers and ensuring that the hurdles to career success are obliterated. Started in 2017, the team achieves these goals through mentorship for law school students across Nigeria, and does this by having a fine mix of buddies and mentors, a combination of lawyers who recently got out of law school and can easily relate to mentees' concerns, and lawyers who have been out of the system for some 2 to 5 years and can provide career guidance in addition to sharing experiences from their time in law school. As the name tells, Hanson Bridges helps to hold the hands of the law school students through the law school process, providing necessary guidance, advice, and support to them, and also helps to bridge the career gap by organizing events and providing resource persons to help prepare them for the many challenges of a legal career in Nigeria. 2 months ago, we organized the Meet the Recruiter event, where we brought the human resource leads of top firms in the country who shared their insights on what they were looking for and how these lawyers can access these opportunities to work at their firms. Like that event, and indeed like the team Hanson Bridges itself, Grad School Hack was born out of an obvious need. This time, the need was to answer the many questions of Nigerian lawyers seeking to go to grad school. As someone who has been personally inundated with these questions and requests for reviews of personal statements, I know where the shoe bites. And thanks to the lovely team at Hanson Bridges, we have been able to pull this off. In the words of the infamous Laburu, as some people will call her Oba, no matter how fast the car moves, it cannot outrun the road. I must express my gratitude to God, the road on which Hanson Bridges has run since inception. First for the idea and also for the wonderful people he has placed on the team. I'm grateful to Eniola, not Salami, by the way, Esther and Oge, team leads for the teams involved in making the part 1 and part 2 of these series successful, and everyone who has worked hard on their teams. Time will not permit me to mention all your names, but I really appreciate all the hard work, the financial and time commitment, and the complete devotion to seeing this work. From the 2 events, we got about 2,000 registrations, including from prospective grad school applicants from Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and other places outside Nigeria. Nothing we had ever imagined. And having to work around the logistics of this number could not have been the easiest thing. So again, I'm very grateful. I must also express my sincere gratitude to Mrs. Wola Joseph, a mentor that has become a friend. She has supported both parts of the event with her Zoom account at no fee. Thank you very much, ma'am. Grad School Hack has had a lot of intentional planning going to it. The facilitators are fellow Nigerians, regular people, if I may add, who gained admission, secured scholarships, and went on to attend some of the best schools across the world. We ensured to find the balance across schools in Canada, Europe, the UK, the US, as well as across LLMs, JDs, MBAs, and PhDs, degrees lawyers typically look to acquire abroad. We also consider the question of what happens after the LLM. So in The facilitator mix are people who have gone on to find great jobs both in Nigeria and in foreign jurisdictions and can share experiences on the process. I really appreciate every speaker who has made our time to be here today. It's a significant time commitment, and I pray that God blesses you immensely and rewards your sacrifice with good. I will not take any more time out of the time of the speakers as I'm eager to listen to them myself. I appreciate everyone who has made it here today, and I hope this event answers all your pressing questions about grad school. I thank you all.
All right, thank you so much, Caleb. Really appreciate. Just to inform our speakers that the program is generally divided into 3 segments, which would address the application process for admission into grad school, next the financing option, and finally how candidates can access opportunities with their grad school degrees. So in no particular order, I would want to call on the speakers to briefly introduce themselves, tell us about the school they went to or they're currently in, and including what they do at the moment. So in no particular order, I'd like to start with Ife Olua Ugumbufumi. Hello, Ife. Good afternoon.
I knew you were going to call me first. Gut feeling. I was just like, whatever I'm doing, let me just stop it in time. But hi, everyone. Good morning. Gosh, it's nice to, well, it's afternoon BST. So good afternoon, everyone. If you're in Nigeria, good afternoon. If you're in the US or wherever else, good morning. I don't know what time it is in the country that's in the evening now anyways, but it's nice to be here. Thank you so much, Caleb. Thank you, everyone. I'm seeing so many friends here, so I'm excited. I feel very comfortable. You know yourselves, so let me not take too much time to do that. My name is Ife Olua. I worked and trained as a lawyer in Nigeria. I started out my work experience in the office of Nigeria's vice president. Then I moved to Bawani Godalo, where I worked with the banking and finance team and the fintech teams. Currently, I'm an MBA candidate at the Said Business School, University of Oxford. I believe I start classes in 2 weeks, but I'm already in England. So it's nice to see everyone, smiling faces. I hope that personally I can add some sort of value to today's event, and hopefully more and more people, aspire to do this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ife. I'd like to call on Daniel Jayoba. Hello, Daniel.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you to Hans and Bridget for this opportunity. I'm Daniel Jayoba. I'm a trained lawyer. I worked in Bawani Godalo for a number of years. I worked in the banking and finance and the fintech practice group in the firm. I'm currently an MBA candidate at the Harvard Business School, and yeah, happy to be here.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm happy you're here as well. I'd want to call on Viola. Good afternoon again, Viola. Could you please introduce yourself? Thank you.
Sure. Hi, Gregory. Hi, everyone. My name is Viola. I'm actually happy to be here to share this virtual stage with a couple of my friends and some of the finest lawyers I know. I obtained my LLM from NYU last year. But prior to that, I worked with Bawani Godalo. I guess BNI were reigning here in the energy and projects team for about 2 years before I proceeded to NYU. And I'm actually qualified to practice in Nigeria, obviously, and I'm awaiting my call to the New York bar, which, thankfully happens next month. I currently work at C2 Energy Capital LLC as an associate counsel, and I advise the development, construction, financing, and operation teams in actually seeing that solar projects go live, which is actually an interesting thing, considering that electricity and, transition to clean energy is actually a big deal across the globe. I'm actually, happy to be here, and like Ife said, hopeful that, I'll share some valid tips that would help younger lawyers and friends to actually, get this experience. So looking forward to speaking at this event. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Viola. Can I call on Nifemi Awe? Good afternoon, Nifemi.
Hi, good morning. It's morning here, but yeah, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Nifemi. I'm in the second year of my LLM in Air and Space Law at McGill. And it's such a pleasure to be here and to have this opportunity to speak to grad students. And I also hope that I'm able to at least shed some light and help prospective candidates in their journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Nifemi. I see Michelle is on the call. Good afternoon, Michelle. Could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Mitch, I think you're muted.
No, I can't. I'll just call on another speaker, so if that's fine. All right. So MNK, good afternoon again.
Hi everyone, good afternoon.
Good
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Oh, I thought I was the same as Mitch. I was on mute. But hi everyone, my name is Emenike Omeye. I'm so excited to be here. I've been a part of Hands and Bridges for quite a few years now. I can't remember since when, but I think it was 2018 or 2017, but I'm not exactly sure now. And I'm really excited about this initiative because I mean sometimes it's easy to forget when you pass a certain stage to send the letter down. And I think the essence of maybe getting to where we are is essentially to get the letter down there and get other people to also access the same opportunities that we're able to access at a certain stage in our lives. So just like most people here, I also started my career working at Bon and Igodalo, where I worked in the capital markets team, practiced mostly Nigerian capital markets law, advising on a bit on tax law too along the way. Then I studied at the Harvard Law School. I currently work still in capital markets, but at the US team of a British firm.
Thank you, Emenike. Thank you for joining us as well. Can I call on Michelle again?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Good afternoon.
Oh, fantastic. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mitchell Agatise. Unlike everybody before me, I did not work and do not work at Banu and Igodalo, so sorry to burst your bubble. I work with Olanuwajai LP. I've been privileged to work in the government business department as well as oil and gas financing, which I have done for the past several years. I studied at the University of Leicester for my LLB, and I studied at the London School of Economics and Political Science for my LLM in 2015, where I led the African Business Summit, which is one of the leading ones in Europe. I'm very pleased to be here. Like Emenike, I've also been with Hands and Bridges from the very start, and I can't wait to share some tips and also learn from you guys here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michelle. We also can't wait to hear from you. Can I call on Bimi Sola? Good afternoon, Bimi Sola.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are. My name is Bimisola Oshadwa. I studied for my LLM in International Commercial Law at the University College London, 2019-2020 Shivnin Scholar, as an awardee of the Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office of the UK government. So currently I run my own practice here in Nigeria as the founding partner of Dynamics Impact Legal into trade and investment law advisory and advisory for tech startup and MSMEs in Nigeria. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the constant follow-up, Oge. I mean, she's been amazing. I know there are other people on the team, but they've just been so amazing putting this together. And I consider it a great privilege to be able to share some of the strategies and principles that I applied in my application process, both applying for the school and applying for the Shivnin Scholarship and maybe other scholarship. And I believe that after the session today, the participants will have would have spent their time valuably and be able to get a lot of insight from the depth that will be shared by also the amazing friends and colleagues that I can see on the call today. So I'm so excited to see everyone, and I look forward to a great session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Gbemi. We also look forward to a great session with you. Can I call on Ike? Good afternoon, Ike.
Good afternoon. Good morning from this side, right? Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Iko Biora. I'm a graduate of University of Illinois. I had my LLM in 2019 in intellectual property and technology law. Prior to coming to the United States for my LLM, I worked as an attorney in a commercial law firm in Lagos. I'm overly excited being here today. When I saw the flyer and some few friends and best of minds that I know in legal profession, I'm so excited being here today to share tips. To help younger ones, because everybody knows sometimes that most of us we are in that shoe, trying to get the best information we can to move to the other side. So I'm also here today, not just to maybe share tips, but also to learn from the great minds I think I can learn. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for honoring our invitation as well, Ike. Can I call on Obina? Good afternoon, Obina.
Good afternoon, Gregory, and good day to everyone else. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you to the organizers of this program for the opportunity to share my experience and what I've done in the past. I'm like everyone else here, I'm a lawyer. I did not start my career out at a law firm. I began my career at an investment bank, worked there for a while, and then I moved to Access Bank. I was there for a few months before I moved to Columbia for my LLM program. And currently I am an associate in the corporate practice group of New York law firms, Cadin Arps. So both the M&A team and the capital markets team combined into one. So I'm really excited to be here, and I look forward to sharing my experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Obina. We also can't wait to hear of your experience. Can I please call on Dr. Reginald to please introduce himself and just briefly tell us where you went to grad school or the grad schools you attended and what you currently do. Thank you again for having us, Dr. Reginald.
No, thank you very much, Gregory. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies, the background is a bit dark. I'll be moving locations shortly. My name is Reginald Aziza. I am currently an attorney with Chevron Nigeria Limited. In terms of grad school, I was fortunate to attend the University of Cambridge, where I did the Masters of Corporate Law, and also completed my doctorate quite recently from the University of Oxford. Prior to that, I had experience working in law firms, both in Nigeria and abroad in London and in Paris. But again, like everyone has said, it's great to be here today. Look forward to sharing experiences and also learning in case I need to make one last application. Thank you very much.
Oh, really? Thank you, Dr. Reginald. I just wanted to inform members of our audience that Elizabeth Mwareze will not be joining us. She had called shortly before the event started to inform us of our unavailability. Hello, Chioma.
Hello.
Yeah, hello. So can we start the first segment of the program? Handing over the mic to you. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everybody. So in this first section of the program, we will be addressing the application process. So we got most of our questions were centered on how to navigate the application process as well as the funding. So I'll start with the application process. And the very first thing that most of our participants would like to know is, how does one begin to position himself or herself as a prospective applicant? So if you could speak to the undergraduate version of yourself, what tips would you give as to how to be an attractive applicant? So And when's the best possible time to start the application process? So I think I'll start with that question. Who should we begin with? Nifemi, could you take a stab at it first?
Okay. Yeah, hi everyone. Advice to my younger self, I would do things about the same way I did things up until now. And when should you start? For me, I'd known that I wanted to do air and space law all of my life. So I know a lot of people don't probably know what area of law they want to do, but from Babcock, my research was in aviation law, and I knew this is what I wanted to do. And I was certain I wanted to go to McGill. So a couple years before I knew it was time to go, I began my research to look at what to do, what the process is like. And I also had to reach out to people who were in the school, and which is one thing that I think every person looking to go to grad school should do. It's very helpful reaching out to Nigerians or people who aren't even Nigerians who are already in the school that you want to go to. And if you, for instance, know what you want to do or where you want to go, you can carefully build your experience around it to make your application, when it's time, a lot robust. For instance, I volunteered on various projects. Before I came to McGill, I was volunteering with a space project in the US. And the combination of all of that, I believe, helped my application, knowing that I had research in aviation law, I had some work, volunteer experience in space law, all of that put together, and my work just before grad school helped the process. But if you don't know, say, oh, I don't know what it is I want to do, I'm just going to keep, progressing in my career. I've seen people whose career have influenced, what they did. Maybe somebody started in corporate law, and because of that, they decide to do an LLM in that area. But yeah, carefully build your research, volunteer work around what that you want to do, and it's quite helpful.
Right, that sounds lovely. And then the next question, which I think is tied to this, is what influences the decision to either apply for an LLM or an MBA? We're fortunate today to have 2 MBA candidates. And a lot of our questions were centered on that. What influenced your choice of the postgraduate program and your choice of school? So I think Ife and Daniel might be in great positions to answer that question, seeing as they're MBA candidates. Ife, would you like to begin?
Sure thing. Gosh, I feel like I have a template response to this question because I've had but really speaking, so I had started my career out not in a law firm, right? I started in the public sector in the vice president's office. I did that, but as amazing as that was, one of the things I realized was that I was working with a lot of senior people, and I knew that if I wanted to, sort of like grow in my career, it was very important for me to learn the ropes, like we always say, right? So I said, okay, you know what? Let me try out this law firm life, right? And then I joined BNI. But while at BNI, a couple of months after that, myself, Daniel is here. Daniel and I are very close friends, and a couple of other colleagues of ours, excuse me, started out the fintech team at BNI. So prior to that time, it was submerged with the private equity team, but thankfully we were able to successfully pitch, to the partners in charge that there was a need to have a standalone fintech team. I think doing that, I'm in a room and I'm chatting with young founders who are so passionate, who are so excited about how they are personally using technology to improve lives. That just checking, okay. That was something very exciting for me. But what it also made me realize, lighting up a bulb in my head was that I personally knew that I wanted to be more involved, in the business and strategy side of things than solely on the legal side, which in itself is not a bad thing if you thoroughly enjoy it, right? But you need to realize that everybody's path is different and it's okay. I think one thing that, I'm hoping that I can show people with this move that I've made is it's okay to take a different path. It's okay to explore other things. It's okay if you don't want to go the route that everyone else is going, right? And so that's how, my MBA journey began, talking to people, asking questions constantly because it was scary, right? Literally going out of my comfort zone, praying to God because I'm Christian, right? It was a very important part of the process for me to make sure that after studying law for 5 years, going to law school, 6 years in total, I won't come and tell my mother that I'm not sure this law is a thing again, and then she asks me what's next and I can't really answer, right? So it was important for me, to hopefully get it right. And, there really began the process for me to decide to do an MBA.
That's helpful, Ife. Thank you. And so for Daniel, I think my question is really going to be for an undergraduate student or a student at the law school currently. What would you say is the major difference between the LLM and an MBA program? And so if someone is really at that crossroad trying to decide, what would you say are the factors that tilt you in one direction or the other? And just a general announcement whilst you think on that, given the time constraint that because we have like a lot of panelists, we would like every speaker to please limit their answers to about 4 minutes each. So thank you. Daniel, over to you.
Okay, thanks guys. So I think the major difference between an MBA and an LLM, and I was thinking about it just yesterday after we ended our classes for the week. And I would say the major difference is, so for law, let's just start with that. For law, you find that you're only taught the legal skills and how to essentially probably interpret issues and matters from a legal point of view, how to review contracts, how to negotiate from a legal side. But with an MBA, you see is more holistic. And even if we talk about the legal side, we're talking about the legal side from how to think like an entrepreneur, how to think like a manager, how to think like the owner of a business, or how to think like an entrepreneur. So for example, we were talking about efficiency and how to make organizations grow and work better in my class yesterday. And no legal aspect of it came up. Along the way now had to introduce, we can have legal agreements, quote and unquote. But for me, it's just having to understand, and we're using numbers. So just having to understand how to make work more efficient, how to do things, how to achieve results in an organization, but not from the legal side of it, not from drafting documents, not from contracts, but from thinking strategy, thinking marketing, thinking operations, thinking just every other aspect of the business that is not legal. So I think the major difference is law is more without, I'm a lawyer, so more law is, I won't say restricted, but law is more focused, exactly. So law is more specific to the legal side of it and the law as to what it is. But for an MBA, you're looking at it holistically, you're looking at it 360, you're analyzing it from different aspects, you're analyzing it from different angles. So yeah, I think that's like the major difference between the LLM and the MBA.
Great, that's very illuminating. And I think another question which must come to mind, seeing as most of you on the panel, or all of you, have some level of work experience or had some level of work experience before applying for your programs, is how relevant would you say, and this question is addressed to Mitch, because I think Mitch did his master's before he came back to work. So now that you're working and you've probably had to interact with a lot of people who worked before they went back to school, how relevant would you say that having years of working experience is to being successful in your postgraduate application? And if you could do things a bit differently, would you have done things differently?
Thank you very much, Shoma, and very good question. I mean, having now spent about 5 years since the LLM, I think that there is merit in both aspects of it, and I'll just quickly go into this mindful of time. For people who have had a bit of work experience, you're coming into the LLM with a better understanding of how useful it is going to be. That way, oftentimes you're able to zero in on the aspects, the modules, the topics that you want to, should I say, focus on in your LLM. And aside that as well, you also have a clearer understanding of how you're going to use those tools in your day-to-day work, because you already understand the challenges that you might have faced, one, in terms of the technical work, and two, you also might have a better understanding about the type of glass ceilings or concrete ceilings or whatever ceilings they might be that you want to shatter based on your postgraduate qualification. So that's really the benefit of having done some work experience beforehand. Now, on the flip side, for someone like me, I did my LLM immediately after school. And I think I was fortunate in the sense that I had a very clear understanding at that time about what I wanted to do. So I remember in my university yearbook, I had written that I want to be working on the most significant finance deals in Africa, because I just had a clear understanding about the finance gap in terms of infrastructure, etc. As a result of that, I tried to find a school that was very strong in terms of financial law, which the LSE had. And I kind of think of myself as a person at the intersection of law and policy making. And as a result of that, because LSE has a strong political science base, I was also able to audit classes that helped me in terms of deepening my understanding thereof. Now, what that did for me is that when I was coming into the work environment, of course, I still had a lot to learn in terms of technical skills, but I found that in terms of being quick on the uptake, in terms of understanding the world of finance, and in terms of then getting the skills that my apprenticeship, quote unquote, in a leading law firm was available for, I was able to scale up very quickly, because I wasn't just coming with the base contract law, tort law understanding. I had now begun to understand the world of finance, credit default swaps, capital markets, what the issues are. So that was very helpful, and it has helped my rise. If I could do things differently, I would say, I don't think that I would have done the LLM later. I think what I would have done is that I didn't speak to as many people as I should have. Thankfully, it has not been a regret for me, but I have seen for other people that they will end up doing an LLM, a general LLM, and they're like, oh, I like law of the sea. It looks interesting. I'm going to do that. Or I like the history of jurisprudence. I quite like that. And they take all these modules and they realize that because of the area they really want to focus on, it's of no real relevance to them. So in terms of advice for people that want to do it a bit earlier, I would say just try and speak to as many people that are in the field of what you want to do in the coming years. And when you're there, also try and relate with as many people who are in practice so that you're beginning to understand the technical basis. And finally, when you then get into the world of work, don't think that because you have the LLM, you're the superstar, you understand it all. Just understand that it now becomes a platform upon which you can build quicker, faster, and deeper than your contemporaries might be able to. So I think that's what I have to add on that.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mitchell. So for this section, we're about rounding it off. But the next question is really as to like really crafting your statement of purpose or letter of intent. And I think, Emenike, if you could help us with this question, how do you make a great pitch for your application? So what are the sort of things that you'd say must be included in your letter of intent or statement of purpose to make it stand out? What sort of referees should we be looking out for? Do you prefer, would you say academic references are preferable or professional references, or does that really depend on where you are in your career? And this was a question that came up a lot. How do we scale the hurdles in obtaining transcripts, especially if you attended a Nigerian institution where that could have been a problem? So if you need me to go over any of these elements of the question again, I'll be happy to do that. Oh, and when best to begin the application? And there's some LSAT questions too. Well, let's start from here.
Yeah, thanks, Joma. So I think there are a couple of dynamics around the question, and there are a couple of links to it too. But to begin with the first one, which is about the personal statements, I see it as like, it's best to see yourself as a project and seeing it as an opportunity to pitch yourself as a project at the most basic level. And it's about putting your best foot forward as I'm sure like most people are aware. But then, again, what I think most people find a bit challenging about it is how best to present it. Okay, you know you have to put your best foot forward, but how best do you articulate your journey? You know, put it together in a way that will catch the attention of the guy who's going to be reading it on the other side of the computer at the end of the day. And the way I like to think about it, I like to think about it as trying to sell two phases of yourself. And you might find it to be true no matter what program you're applying for, whether it's an LLM, whether it's an MBA, whatever program it is, but trying to sell to the person who is going to ultimately assess you two phases of yourself. This is who you are. This is what you've done in the past. These are your antecedents in the past. These are the things you've been able to accomplish in the past. This is what you are doing now. And this is what you hope to do in the future, right? And making sure that there is some connect between these three different phases of yourself. So it's essentially articulating a story that says, this is what I hope. Schools are like essentially doing the same thing that you want to do, in the sense that you want to get into the best school. The school you're applying to want to get the best possible candidate. They need it because it tells on their ranking, it tells on their alumni prestige, it tells on the overall reputation of the school, right? So if you see the school as being as selective as you're trying to be when you're applying to them, it's really helpful. So you're telling the institution, this is what I want to do. Everybody says that, so it's not anything spectacular, right? Everybody will say, I want to do so and so thing in the future. This is why I'm applying to your school, right? But again, what they will expect to say is, why should we believe you? Why should we give you the opportunity? You want to be president of Nigeria. Oh, that sounds interesting. Harvard, Cambridge, Oxford, Columbia, whichever institution you're applying to would be like, oh, that's interesting. You want to be president of Nigeria. I want to have an alum that is a president of Nigeria, right? So but why should we believe you that you want to be president of Nigeria, right? Then you begin to articulate your story. It's good to preemptively consider these factors. This is what I've done in the past. You know, I've always been passionate about leadership. Okay, why should we believe you're passionate about leadership? I led social, and this will ultimately, I imagine, lead to other questions, which I don't want to preempt at this point, because then we'll have to consider the question of what should you be doing when you are an undergrad, right? But again, if I may briefly touch on it, it then begs the question, what were you doing? What have you been able to accomplish in the past that shows that you have the capacity to accomplish such a massive ambition, right? So this is what I did in the past. I led so organization. And ultimately, like, this will come back to the question of what recommendation you will tender to the school at the end of the day. But you are saying, I did so in the past. If you look at what I've done in the past, if you look at what I'm doing presently now, you will see that there is a believable, considerable, strong, compelling connection between all of those phases. And this is how it ties to what I want to do in the future. And this is why you should believe me. So I think if at the time you put pen to paper and try to write your personal statement, you are thinking in this light, it's super helpful, because then you understand what the institution is looking out for. Because at the end of the day, it's good to have in mind that whichever school you're applying to is going to receive a lot of personal statements. And however way you achieve it, it is important that you have something really, really compelling, something almost unimpeachable in how compelling it is in delivering that pitch, which is your journey as a student, you know, as a potential student. So it's important to think about it as like you are trying to convince them. And it doesn't matter if you give it, it's always useful to give it to a lot of people to review it, but it's also important to remain original to yourself, because I find that you write the most believable things when you're original. You know, when you try to, as accurately as possible, deliver, you know, your trajectory, your journey in a compelling essay. So I find that if you take your time, put together an essay that answers this three-phased question, it's almost likely to get some attention. So I think the second question, because of time, I think the second question is about the transcript, right? Or was it the transcript? I think it was about the transcript.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it was what sort of recommendation you should seek out for.
Yes, what sort of recommendations, the transcripts, and when to begin the entire process.
Yeah, so about recommendation, that's a very important, I would say two things are the most important. I can speak for LLM because that's the program I applied to and that's the program I pursued. I can speak for LLM, and in speaking to it, I would say the two most important documents you are going to be sending to the school are it's almost always the case that it's your personal statement and your recommendation. There should be some connect also between your recommendation and the narrative that you deliver in your personal statement, the articulation you've made about your journey. So, for instance, you see a scenario where a lot of people make an application. They write a really beautiful personal statement articulating their journey. This is what I've done. This is what I hope to do. Really compelling, really interesting, getting the attention of the school. And then because they review these things in phases, right? But then they look at your personal statement and they're looking at like, okay, you said you are really keen about capital markets, for instance. But the guy who wrote your recommendation is saying you are super excited about space law, for instance. And the guy who is reading this is wondering what's happening here. Like, why are you? And remember, it's most often the case that you don't say it. It's possible you don't say it. But if you haven't sort of guided your recommenders to understand the peculiarity of your narrative, by the time you make the application, there can be that disconnect, which can be really fatal to your application. So you have to coordinate that process really well. Your recommender may be someone, maybe your professor, who back in school knew you to be very excited about consumer protection or intellectual property, but your journey has evolved over time and you've become super keen about tech, and your personal statement is talking about tech. But if you haven't told them, this is the cornerstone on which I hope to build this application. This is the point of leverage, so to say. They wouldn't know, right? And they would write something that is not very, very relevant or that doesn't circle around finally with what your application should be. So it's important to speak to the people who you hope to recommend you ahead of time, not tell them what to write, right? But, groom them, for lack of language, groom them a lot to understand the narrative you hope to deliver, so that when they do write a recommendation for you, it is consistent with the overall theme of your story, right? So I wouldn't say there's a preference between getting it from your professors or getting it from your superiors or your work colleagues, but I would say try to get recommendations that are consistent and that resonate, that resonate in the context of your overall application, right? So in my own case, I got one from an academic mentor and I got one from a professional mentor. And I would say perhaps good to have that balance. If you can give more, I know for MBAs, they typically want you to give, more recommendation, and maybe it serves some utility to have more recommendation, or maybe not, depending on how you think it ties into your application as a whole. So consider it in the light of your application and the things you want to say, and whether you think these recommendations you already have covered the field in terms of what you hope your recommenders to say. So if you think this is a person who knows about my academic achievements a lot, you made a first class, made a 5.0 or whatever, this person will cover my academic accomplishments very nicely, then perfect. If you think this person will cover your professional achievements very nicely, perfect. But if you think there's an aspect of your journey, which of course you alone is best positioned to know, that is peculiar, and which you think you need a third recommender or a fourth recommender, depending on your scenario, to deliver, that may also be useful, right? So I would say, think about it in the context of your overall application. Think about it in the context of what you consider to be the most important message you hope to send to the guys who are going to review your application. Think about it in that context. Really helpful. I'm not sure there is a blanket advice to give on that, but it's helpful to really, really consider it in the context of the application you hope to make. Basically, it's always useful to start super early. There's nothing that's being too early, right? Because, I know that some schools even review on an ongoing basis, which means that if you are sending in your applications when their review period is already closed, that means you might be disadvantaged in some way, right? So it's always a good advice to start super early, sending your applications early. Easier said than done if you're in Nigeria, right? Because you can do everything early and then your transcripts will frustrate you. I know that some schools have really big issues when it comes to processing transcripts, which takes me to the third limb of the question about transcript. So still the same advice, start super early. Put together be calculated about every step of the way. You really want to do this. Maybe you've practiced for some time and this is the next major step you want to take in your career. Be deliberate about it, be calculated, start very early. Most importantly, the ones that people forget very often, you can even process your recommendation on time, but if you don't begin early to talk to your recommenders, sometimes talking to them may entail reconnecting with people who you hope will say the best things about you, but who you haven't been in touch with for such a long time. It might be a simple call to that professor who taught you in 200 level to say, oh, how is your family? How is everyone? How is your wife? You know what you are aiming at ultimately. You might want to talk to him about recommendation in the next 4 months, but if you're talking to the guy a week before your recommendation, the guy's probably going to say, like, this guy is talking to me because of this recommendation, so not nice. So you want to begin early to cultivate or restart that relationship and give him the best, the best sentiments about you, so that when the time comes for him to deliver a recommendation, he says the most important, the best things. So I would say time is of the essence. Start early in terms of both your recommendation and both your transcript. Start super early. If you need to talk to people to help you on ground in your institution to begin the process of your transcript, start it really early. I know that sometimes schools have accommodations that they make for people who have submitted other applications, but transcripts are outstanding, right? So they can be a bit considerate about that. But again, like, you don't want to put yourself in that narrow corner. Yeah.
That's very helpful. You helped us kill about 5 birds with 1 stone, and we're very grateful for that. And I think you raised a point that is relevant to the very last question we want to ask in this session. So I'm going to be out of your way very shortly for Greg to come in. And I'd like to direct that question to Dr. Reginald. And it really has to do with, and we got a multitude of questions related to this whole thing of redemption. Redemption in the sense of, what are the prospects for a person who doesn't have a very strong academic background? So say a 2-2 and below, and basically that person's prospects with postgraduate applications was beginning again, which is what I mean by redemption. So what are the prospects for such a person who, say, hasn't had the best of grades, but has some level of work experience and and most likely not in a top tier firm? Because if you worked in Nigeria, we kind of know the relationship between, first class and 2-1s and top tier firms. Such a person who hasn't had an experience in a top tier firm, but say has done significant things, say in a smaller firm, what are that person's chances? Or how does someone really go about that whole journey of redemption, so to speak, and in the postgraduate journey? So that's my question.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, and great insights from all the panelists so far. Like I said, I probably should be thinking of my next application now, so I'll probably start as early as I can. Now, in relation to the question, and it's a question I get a lot of times, because if we're being honest with ourselves, not everyone will come out with sterling grades from university. Not everyone will have the first classes and the best grading students from the Nigerian law school, and so you have a sizable number of people who are in this situation. And my advice to them has usually been this: if you look at the legal profession, you have two chances at redemption here. You have the university and you have the law school, right? Now, for graduate studies, quite understandably, a lot of emphasis is placed on your university education. So that would typically be the strong starting point. But I know people who have made 2-2s in university who have redeemed themselves at the law school, and on that basis have gotten into top tier law firms, and from there launched into massive law practices abroad and fantastic graduate studies. And I know people who the reverse has been the case. Fantastic results in university, not so great at the law school, but still ultimately doesn't matter. For people who are in this space where maybe on both university and at the law school, results have not been so strong. Of course, necessary next consequence is that they've not been able to get into the big tier law firms, and therefore, back to the point about personal statements, when telling a story about themselves, they're not able to justify based on what they have done the sort of ambition that they have. What I tell those people is usually something about around this. First of all, maybe be realistic about your choice of universities, right? So you've made a 2-2 university and a 2-2 at the law school in the past, then you understand it will take you something very strong to get into Oxford or Harvard or Cambridge or the rest of them, right? So you can start off by being realistic about what those expectations are. Secondly, and I think this is a very strong point, you can redeem yourself one more time with another master's program, right? So if you take the view that you don't necessarily have to start off with some fantastic Ivy League, Oxbridge University at first shot, right? But you get into an equally solid school, and it's not to say that a school that is not Ivy League or Oxbridge is not great. Of course, there are fantastic schools that are not necessarily Oxbridge or Ivy League, right? You go into one of them and you excel. You take that as your next shot at redemption, right? You absolutely excelled. That then creates that launch pad that you can possibly have to get into the school of your dreams, because on that basis, you show a transcript, and then you can justify or explain what circumstances limited you whilst you were studying in Nigeria. And there's evidence to show that in a different environment, you can perform exceptionally well. So I typically consider that as using an institution, if a solid institution that's not necessarily Ivy League, to set yourself up to set up a sort of launch pad that takes you to where you want to be. Next step is, and something that has already been spoken about previously, it's around volunteering, and more specifically around the area you want to do your graduate studies in. Now, as an example, if you wanted to take a master's in corporate law, right, you could understand how competitive that is by definition. You want to take a master's in finance and capital markets, great stuff, but be ready for the competition. And if your grades are at that level, then, and you're applying to a top school, it's fair to say that the chances of getting are fairly slim, right? But if your interests are in some other fields that don't necessarily rely so strongly on academics, then even at first go, you may have a good shot if you have solid experience and solid volunteering. So think of an area like human rights as an example. Human rights law is not a place where you necessarily have to have gotten some fantastic results from university to justify yourself as a solid person in this field, right? And as such, even with grades that would not necessarily be competitive for the flagship corporate financial economic style programs, in a field like human rights law, a lot depends on what you are currently doing, not what your certificates currently show, right? So if you are in that field, and it's consistent again with the fact that you probably were not in top tier law, or you were in a human rights NGO, you're somewhere, right? You don't have to have been in a BNI, an Olano Ajayi, or whatever it is. You could be in a smaller size law firm. You could be in a human rights NGO. You may not have had the best of grades, but you are a solid person in this field. I assure you that you'll get into the Masters in Human Rights Law. Is a special program in Oxford quite easily, right? So those are some of the considerations I think you can apply. I would always start off by telling people, look, get the grades, because it just makes your life a lot easier, right? But it has never been the case that in the absence of the grades, you can't ultimately get to your destination. You just have to be strategic about it. And you have to perhaps realize that it will require a bit more effort from you than it would have from the person who had the great grades to begin with. Thank you.
That is absolutely helpful. And I think it has helped to demystify most of the questions that a lot of people here have. Obinna would like to weigh in on that. So if you could share your thoughts with us in about 2 to 3 minutes, would be grateful, so that I can get out of the way and Gregory can carry on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chioma. So Reginald has basically said everything there is to say on this, but then I would also just mention that sometimes life happens, right? You know, sometimes you might have fallen ill a week to the exams or something, and you probably were not on your A game. And then for persons who went to the law school years back, I hear that has changed now, which is a good thing. The grading curve, grading you on your lowest grade might have impacted you. But then I think it is so important to have a really good support system and network system. And I cannot speak to, I don't know much. I never applied to any British school, so I cannot speak to the British school. But then I applied to, when I was applying for graduate school, I applied to just 2 schools. I applied to Stanford and Columbia, both Ivy League school. Well, Columbia is an Ivy League school. And obviously grades count. There is no discounting that. And as Regina said, if you don't have the grades, it can definitely make your life more difficult. But then based off what you have done in the past, you could definitely overcome that hurdle. So for instance, you might not have had a 2-1 first class, which is the prerequisite to get into a top law firm. But then if you have been able to show initiative, so for instance, I know someone who she had stellar grades from undergraduate school, but then at the law school, she had a pass, even though, well, she lost her dad. And so she had a really good reason, because it was just a really, really trying period for her. But then when I asked her how she was able to get into graduate school and then make it into a top law firm in New York, she told me that the experience which she had, obviously she was unable to get into, one of the big names back home in Nigeria, but then she was able to go off on her own, right? And she was able to do considerable good work on her own. So even though you do not have the grades, you should definitely look for every single opportunity, to build up a profile that can help you get into a really good law school. And of course, as everyone has said, what you intend to do is so, so important in making inroads, right? So for instance, if you want to be a human rights, of course, then your experience counts. But then if you want to do something in corporate law, you might not have access to work on major transactions, which will help you boost your resume. But then you can choose to, say, work on publications. You can choose to volunteer with government agencies. So just choose to be creative, leverage on your network, leverage on the resources that you have, and you could come up with really creative means, of showing initiative and showing drive. And so, for instance, I just joined Skadden Arps in New York, and I can tell you for a fact that I also interviewed with a number of law firms. They are not so much about grades as they are not so much hell-bent on what you made in school as they are about what you are currently doing, your initiative, your drive, and your willingness to put in the work. So just put this in mind and understand that life happens, but you could always make the best of your situation.
Thank you so much, Obin. I believe you had made life easier for a ton of people on this call. So thank you for your insight. Thank you, Dr. Reginald, and everyone else who has contributed. So this is the end of this session on applications. We'll be moving right into the tuition, scholarships, and finance section, which Gregory will be handling. So Gregory, over to you.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Chema. So in relation to this session about financing grad school, I would like to call on Bimisola to please answer this. So what are the chances of an applicant who doesn't have the best grades, getting funding in terms of applications for scholarship? What chance does that person have? I mean, you've gone through the stress to gain admission to grad school. And then funding is also another issue or another hurdle you have to overcome. So what are the chances of success for such a person? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gregory. So speaking to funding, I'll be drawing my example with a couple of scholarships I've applied for, or I'm aware of their funding strategy, and particularly with respect to Chevening. I studied on the Chevening Awards, the Chevening Scholarship, which is a fully funded scholarship. And when I mean fully funded in every sense of the word, covering the tuition, living expense, cost of travel, everything. So then drawing also from the example of friends who have gone on to also study on some other form of funding. For Shivnin, when it comes to grade in relation to your question as regards the selection process. So I'll be speaking from two standpoints: for someone who has been a recipient and someone who has also been on a panel, like an assessor. So I was invited by the British High Commission some months back to join the panel of assessors to select during the interview selection process of those that will be proceeding to the UK this month. Later this month, they'll be traveling this month. They had their pre-departure event sometimes last week. So that gave me a perspective as to what these funders are looking out for. But with my own personal experience with Shivnin, I found out that the first point of call for anyone is to understand what the objective of the scholarship, those administering the scholarships are, what's their priority. Like when it comes to some scholarship, just like we have made reference to the importance of grades in terms of what you finished with in your first degree, or maybe for those who are looking to pursue an LLM, maybe in law school. But for some of these programs, I think for Shivnin, the grade for law school does not even count, because I know there are majority of lawyers on this call. It was more about your undergraduate degree. But that undergraduate degree does not in itself means some scholarship place that as the number one priority. For some, it might be. But speaking for Shivnin funding and a couple of others that I'm aware of, some of them are about the things you have gone on to do even after the degree or outside of the degree, outside of what you finished with. So I finished with a 2-1 from the university. And for me, so that wasn't really an issue. Like, okay, yes, with a first class with a 2-1, you can easily apply for any funding opportunity. But then I had people on Shivnin, I've seen example of people who finished with 2-2. And I've heard of those who finished with 3rd class who have gotten Shivnin scholarship. So for a scholarship like Shivnin and some others, they are big on the things you have done outside of the academic. Like there could be things you did while you were in school, maybe extracurricular activities, leadership, student leadership, or even in your religious institution, maybe in your church, in your mosque, leadership positions that you have held. So those are some of the things they are looking out for when it comes to selection of selecting you. And how do you demonstrate all of this? How do you tell them all of this? You tell them all of this in your application essay. And thankfully, for Shivnin, the application opened last month in August, and it's open till November. And you're wondering, why would they give a long application window like that? They want you to be able to put the best forward when it comes to your application. So you understand that, okay, if it is Shivnin I'm applying for, this is what they are looking out for. If it is this scholarship I'm applying for, this is what they're looking out for. Then you know, okay, how do I position all of my leadership story, everything I've done in the past, put it in this essay, and then convince the scholarship funders to say I'm the best investment. Yes, it's easy to feel like, oh, these people are going to give me this money to go for this postgraduate degree, so they are doing me a favor. But I want us to also see it from the standpoint, like they want the best. So you also present yourself, like Anne has said. Someone said, like you mentioned earlier on, talking about being a project. Like, yes, you are a project, what's their investment? They're looking for future leaders, like they say in Shivnin. So how do you position yourself? How do you put this in all of your essay? Now, I'll give practical example just beyond talking generically. One thing I did first when I knew I was going to apply for Shivnin was I kept a journal. Now, the Shivnin process had like 4 application essays, and these essays determine if you would be selected or not, if you will be shortlisted. So in this journal, I started doing a lot of introspection on what are the stories I want to put forward to convince these funders to give me money, that I'm the best investment, that the next best investment they could ever think of. So in that journal, I started writing, introspecting on my leadership journey. I made reference to things as far back as in secondary school. It's your story. Talk about it. Like, so this, I was able to connect the dots, and they were able to see the trajectory, talked about what happened in law school and all of that. And when I was able to put that together, I made a list of a whole lot of things when I was keeping that journal. But when I wanted to write my application essays, And I'm reiterating this application essay because that is what determines it at the, like for any scholarship, be it Shivnin or any other, that is what determines. In some other, for some other scholarship, probably they don't use the nomenclature Shivnin use. They use things like motivation statement of purpose and the likes of that. But this also encapsulates some of those expectations. So so in that journal, I wrote all of the things I've done. So when it got to the point when I had to start writing, I know I had limited words to write. For Shivni essay, there are about 500 words for each of the essays. So I know I couldn't have written everything. But what I've been able to do keeping that journal was that, and at times I might just be in the shower or doing something and I just remember something like, oh, this thing is really going to catch the attention of the assessors. And then I note those things. And when I started writing, I had to, maybe for one of the essays, I might have had like maybe 7 examples. And I'm like, no, I can't write this 7 in this essay. I just have 500 words. So, but what I've been able to do with that, then I select the best 3. Then I write it. But in all of these essays, I could connect the dots. And this goes a long way in convincing the funder. And something was also said earlier on about the references. I can speak for Shevin. It plays a long role, I mean, in convincing the funders that you're good. They've heard your own story through your application essay, because that's the first point of call. I mean, for the application essay, it's not about anybody accessing in Nigeria. And Nigeria over the years has always had one of the highest number of applications across the world. Over 115 countries that apply for Shivning. So the competition is really high. So it's about putting your best foot forward. So whatever grade that you finish with, to go back to what Gregory attached that question with as it relates to grade, it is immaterial what you finished with for Shivning. Maybe for some years it might count, but then what have you been able to do outside of the grade? Make reference to your leadership journey. And when I mean leadership, it doesn't have anything to do with title. I'm not talking about when you had a role or they called you president of the club or anything. You could just be a team member. But in that team, what did you do to be able to exhibit the attributes of a leader? And when you are presenting your story in any of these essays to convince the funder, I'll just talk briefly about an approach. Some of us might have heard it. It's called the STAR approach. And it's about talking about a situation. It could be in your workplace, maybe in the current law firm where you practice, or while you were holding a leadership position in school, in church, in mosque, anywhere, talk about it. I talked about positions or things I did while in the religious setting, although I had to use nomenclatures that they could relate to, because I know the assessors at times are not even Nigerians. So I must be able to use something they will relate with. And I was able to talk about the story. So the situation, this was what happened. This was the task that when I say STAR, situation, task, action and result. So this was the situation, this was the task this situation presented, and this was the approach I used, and then this was the result. I'll just give one example and I'll conclude. In one of my essays, particularly my leadership essay, while I was in the Nigerian Law School Lagos campus, so I was privileged to serve in the Student Representative Council as the treasurer. Now the duty then as a treasurer was just, oh yes, welfare of the students, and that's it. While we were in school while we're in the law school running the program. But then immediately we got in, we found out that some of our students could not raise their, law school. We all know this whole thing about raising law school fee and all of that. And I also know what I went through to be able to raise the fund for my law school fee. So when we were inaugurated as SRC members, it was just about going about our normal activities. But then students started coming up with, how do they get law school money? Now that was the situation. Then now that's the S. Then it presented a task like, even though I really don't have to do it, because the fact that I'm the trader doesn't mean I have to rise up. But then I felt that nudgings in me to like, how can I support? How can I help? So it presented a task. How do we support and help these law school students in Lagos campus 2015, 2016? And some of these students that can't be enrolled fully because they've not been able to raise it. That's the task. Then what action did I take? Then I consulted with the other members of my ESCOs, the SRC chairman, and I spoke with them about the fact that I wanted to launch a fundraising campaign. Then we launched this fundraising campaign, working with them, with their support, because I couldn't have done it alone, even though I came up with an idea. And then we launched the fundraising campaign, and every morning when the program started in 2015, we'll go to the front of the class auditorium of about over 1,300 students, and we speak to them, we converse for support for the funding, and we raised close to ₦1 million. Now that was the action. What was the result? At the end of the day, we were able to support about 9 law school students with the fund. Some part payment, some had raised some part, and then that was the action. And these students were called to the bar. Our colleagues were called to the bar on the 29th, 30th of November 2016. That is the result. So they want to be able to see all of this. So once you're able to present this in all of your essays, in all of your application, the funders will be convinced. There are also other essays, the study essays, why you have selected the school, why it is that school you've selected, what's it about the school that you've selected, and then your career plan that has been touched on, like what's your future aspiration. And one thing importantly, ask yourself also, what's the priority of the funders? For Shibling is about how to do research and ask what's the priority of the UK government in Nigeria. So how can my own career plan speak to that priority? Those are the things that catches the attention of the funders. And once you're able to put all of this together and all other things being equal, you'll be able to get the attention and you'll be able to get funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bemi. Thank you for sharing the STAR approach and ensuring that we actually pay attention to the priority of the funders. I'd like to call on Ike to also respond to the same question. And afterwards, my next set of questions will be for Nifemi and Viola. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Ike. Please proceed. Yes, I can.
Okay, well, I just want to do a follow-up to the funding question. There is two questions that I always ask myself. We always consider: do we all of us really need funding? Right? Yes, all of us need funding. Can all of us get that funding? No. In most cases, most of us will not get that funding. Then what are we not going to do if you're unable to get funding? Are we going to sacrifice those dreams just because we're unable to get that funding? I don't think that is the correct thing to say. So I don't know about most schools. I don't know about most schools in UK. I never applied to any UK school, but I applied to most US schools. And to every other person who did US application will tell you that most schools, some of the application or some of the admissions come with what they call tuition remission scholarship. Maybe I will explain. Tuition remission scholarship works this way. Maybe the school tuition is $50,000, and maybe when the school is giving you admission, they're giving you admission and said, okay, we are giving you $20,000 in tuition remission. What this means is that they might not send $20,000 for whatever tuition you are going to pay. Then, what some people do is that when you get this, and some of them get discouraged by the amount this school advances to you. I always tell people this from my experience. What I have always known from my experience also is that don't stop. You can always negotiate this scholarship with this school, with some of these schools. Okay, let me say, for instance, I didn't do my own LLM with full funding. In fact, I applied to various schools, like over 10 schools in US, and I got admitted in more than 5 or 7. At this point, it was me trying to weigh which one came with better funding, better opportunity, trying to look at my pros and cons to know which one I will actually go for. But what did I do? I went to University of Illinois. When Illinois first gave me admission, they gave me with $20,000 scholarship. And the tuition is over $50,000. I had to renegotiate. At the end of everything, when I was going to Illinois, I went to Illinois with over $40,000 scholarship. Had I stopped at that $20,000, maybe I would say, okay, I couldn't afford this thing. What will happen? The worst thing that will happen is that the school will say no to you. The worst thing that will happen is that they will say no, they will write an email and say, oh, we are sorry, we cannot proceed with this one, but always negotiate. Then aside negotiating again, and when it also comes to funding, I will tell people like, yes, good grades is so good in securing funding. But during my time at University of Illinois, I also found someone, is an African, she's from Uganda. Grade-wise, she didn't make so good grade. But she came, just like most of us, we make better grades and all that, but she came with full funding. So let your grade, most times your grade you graduated will not deter you. Like every other person, other extracurricular activities might be all they are looking for. These schools are looking for so many things when it comes to funding. Another thing, apart from extracurricular activities, to see that maybe you are a leader, there's something you're bringing to the table. Some of these schools, like Eminike said when he was saying something, some of these schools look at diversity because it also affects their ranking. Just like, for instance, you're applying to a school and you are the only Nigerian that is coming to that school at that point, that LLM program. You get, they would want to do anything they would want to do to bring you to the table. Now, this brings me to the fact that I will tell people like, okay, this said before us that went to University of Illinois, after going there on my set, it looks like every Nigerian is now after University of Illinois. Most people are now, at least there's no year after we went that they don't admit more than 6 or 7 or 9 Nigerians. You can also be creative if you're applying to university, maybe maybe if you're applying to US, there are over 50 schools, 50 states in the US, and all these schools have their law schools. You know, some of these schools in their LLM, they don't even have, most of them, they don't have Africans coming to their LLM, or most times you might even be the only Nigerian coming there. Believe you me, I'm just speaking this thing from experience because I had an interaction with the Dean of Graduate Studies when I was doing my LLM. These are some of the factors they consider. They might consider the fact that, okay, you are bringing this in, we just want to have a culturally diverse LLM class, people from so, and at that point, you might be the most qualified, or in some cases, the only person that is coming from your own country or from your own region. That might weigh so much in your own favor. But there's also a measure of last resort when it comes to funding, which most people are so skeptical about that, and maybe some people don't know. There are also private companies that can even advance loans, student loans to international students that you might use. You might have had some of them, maybe Prodigy, Empower, and what have you. They can advance loan you can use to further your education. Everybody's story might not be the same. Everybody must not go the route of, I have a full funding and have this. There are people who still have achieved their dream through these loans. I mean, I don't need to tell you that most living in America, education is so costly that even Americans, they say most of Americans have all student loans hanging out around your head. But then what I would advise is that if you're taking the route of taking loan to finance your program, one thing I must advise that there is this question you must first ask yourself and answer it before you proceed with your LLM. What do I want to do with this LLM? Am I going to get my LLM just because I want, after I'm done with my LLM, I'm coming back to Nigeria to work, to do this or to do that? If that is your answer, I would not advise you going the route of taking loan to finance your studies. Imagine using Naira to service dollar loan. I mean, that is suicidal. It's suicidal. It's just like rendering yourself useless all your life. Or you can choose not to service it. And you know what that means when you choose not to service the loan? It's more like you have just placed a red flag on yourself, entering into, destroying your FICO, your credit score. But if you've answered yourself, okay, that I'm using this LLM as a route, as a means to relocate, and you settled on that, worst case scenario, what you can do, take a loan if that works for you. You take a loan. Some of these loans are not even much to compare with what most Americans have on their loans. But maybe you have the scholarship and they give you about $40,000, all you just need is maybe $15,000 or $16,000 to complete your student loan. You can take it, and when you are done and you step back and you are working, if you're working over here, it's something you can pay off within some time. But don't ever pick that loan trying to go back to Nigeria using the Naira to service dollar loan. That's just it. I mean, that's just something I just want to shake in when it comes to funding. There are so many factors that weigh in on funding. Not just your grade. Grade is so good, like I said. But other factors is that you might be lucky that what you've done, they've seen something exceptional in you, or also from the cultural aspect of it, you are just coming, they just want to bring this person in because they want them to have a cultural diverse. This might also affect your funding. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ike. That was a much question, and thank you for helping us out with that. I would like to call on Nifemi and Viola, and particularly in relation to funding or financing grad school. I'd want like you both in your comments to just inform us how the Canadian approach, that's for Nifemi, is different from the approach in the United States. Are there peculiar considerations that grad schools in these jurisdictions look at? And also, what other financing options are available? So in terms of, okay, no scholarship is available, probably the student loans, I mean, would not also be sufficient. Can one go to school and work at the same time? How easy is the process? Does it prevent you from concentrating on why you're there, which is your grad school? Thank you. So we can start with Nifemi and then go ahead with Viola.
All right, thank you. Okay, so talking from my experience so far in Canada, and as somebody who's received 5 scholarships so far, I would like to say that, one, you need to know that it's doable. If somebody had said to me that I would have 5 scholarships at the beginning of my program, I would have said, nah. And don't be discouraged if your admission comes without funding, because mine came without funding, and along the line, the funding began to come in. And another thing I would say is, don't limit yourself to just the big scholarships that you know, like Commonwealth, Chevening, and the rest of them. And as much as possible, if you can, combine funding options, you should. So I've had fundings that were, 20,000, 5,000, but you see that it eventually adds up. This is the second year of my program. I have not worked. I mean, I'm currently interning with ICAO. It's a UN organization for the aviation arm. And all I've lived on so far are paying living costs, and my tuition has been funding. And another thing I would say is, for example, if you're doing like a specialized LLM, like in my case, you should look at organizations that fund students to do that program. So I have received scholarships from the US, from Canada, from various organizations. So I've received scholarships from aviation foundations in the US. I've received scholarship from aviation organizations in Canada, and also from STEM, because my program has some element of STEM in it. So if you're doing like a specialized LLM, you can look at organizations that have funding for those specialized LLM. And another thing that I say to people is, you can also look at organizations for scholarships for like Black students. There are quite a number of them. You can look at gender-based scholarships if they're available. There's no reason to not take advantage of them. Another thing for Canada, I know that I was talking to my friend in the US and she was saying it's different. You also have the opportunity to apply for student aid. I don't know if this works for all schools, but my school, you can apply for student aid. And that is, say, for example, I don't have enough money to finance maybe tuition or living costs. You can go to the student aid office, you apply for aid, and you fill your profile and all of that. And depending on, how critical your situation is, they can give you $3,000, for example, to say pay your rent for 1-2 months as possible. So I know that, another option is for people to work. Like I said, I haven't worked to finance my education so far because I've been fortunate to have funding. But one thing I say to people is, don't entirely bank on that, because it might work, it might not work, but it's an option to explore. And of course, now that I am working and in the second year of my program, even though it's with the UN, what I do is to make sure that I also meet my school obligations. The second year of my program, it's a lot more intense because I'm writing my thesis this period. So I have like writing goals that helps me to do work and also pay attention to school. So I would say to people, explore all of the options. If you're going to a school in Canada, don't think, because I'm just in Canada, let me look for what I can get in Canada. You can get scholarships across different jurisdictions, different countries. And as long as, and of course, pay attention to the funding, the funding, limits and things like that. Some funding might say, you can only use this for tuition. I had somebody say to me, how do you have 5 scholarships? Can you have multiple scholarships? And I'm like, yeah, because none of my funding conditions bar me from taking additional funding options. So of course, you don't want to take a funding that says you cannot take any other funding. I mean, it's hard to say no to the money, but depending on how much money it is. In my case, I never had a funding that says, oh, you can't take any other one. I only had funding that said maybe you can only use this for tuition, and I use for tuition, and some that just says, if they give you, they give you. And so yeah, combine multiple options, explore different options across different jurisdictions, across different organizations. You'll be shocked that there are a lot of foundations giving money and people don't know. And that's why you need to talk to people. One of the scholarships I got, it was because somebody said to me, oh, I know this organization that gives money to people, doing aviation and what have you. Trust me, no Google search that I've ever done in my life brought out that funding option. And when I said it to a friend also, it's like, all my Google search has never brought out this option. So you want to talk to people. And another thing I say to people is, when you hope that people tell you about opportunities, when you also get opportunity, tell other people. That's how the world goes round. So talk to people, have people who can share stuff with you, and don't limit yourself. Don't think it's undoable. Combine as many, funding options you can get. Explore all of the options you can explore across different jurisdictions. And if you're fortunate that yours will be financed through working, that's okay also. You can do that equally. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Nifemi. Viola.
Yes. Hi, everyone. So that's a good question, Greg. I'm just actually going to limit my response to, the US jurisdiction, because that's where I studied. The first thing, and I think, I don't know whether it's a mini K or so that kind of alluded to that, is the beauty of US schools, right? Is most of, the schools kind of have funding from the schools, right? So at the time when you're applying, before you probably even think of external scholarship openings or funding, you're likely to get a scholarship from the school, most likely when you get an admission. And how do you, or what better chance do you have to get that scholarship from the school directly before you probably think of, external funding? Typically, you're required to write, a problem that you can then profess solutions to. So it's usually something relating to law. So for example, if you've worked and you've realized that there's a gap in an area, you could actually talk about the gap. You could not necessarily limit it locally, if you're Nigerian, so a Nigerian issue, it could be a global issue, right? So I guess, for example, people applying now, there's the COVID pandemic, you could look for something that's really topical about that and profess solutions, maybe legally, depending on what area you're applying, what area of law you're applying for. But I know that that's one beauty about US schools. And if you're able to kind of present an issue, in my time, I talked about, the electricity gap in Nigeria and how, despite our abundance of resources, we're still bedeviled with, the whole energy access deficit, and kind of preferred solutions that, when I get the knowledge from NYU, I was actually going to use to kind of better the electricity sector and, reforms in Nigeria. So I think that was something that actually helped me to get the Dean Scholarship, which actually wasn't full at the time. But when I reached out to them, and just going back to what Ikobiora said, when I reached out to them to say, oh, I think I actually deserve to get a full funding, at least for my tuition, they were happy to kind of give me a raise. And then they also gave me like other scholarship opportunities that were available at NYU at the time. And thankfully, that was the first time that the Grading Center for Law and Social Entrepreneurship at NYU, which is a center, and just going back also to what Nifemi said, it could be centers in the school you're applying to or organizations in school you're applying to that have scholarship opportunities. And that was the first time they were actually going to give a partial funding to any student who was actually able to demonstrate an intersection between law and entrepreneurship. And I put forward an essay and I got the funding. And so that was how I was able to kind of raise my tuition. Well, thankfully, I have family in the US who, in terms of just living expense, and I had worked in Bawani Godalo just when I was able to save. So that was actually what helped me to kind of, live through, schooling, in the US. So, but I think the point really is, if you're applying to a US school, right, typically, for example, Harvard, you'll be required to actually write an essay. And that essay, you need to really demonstrate intellect, show that this is an area you're interested in, show that this is a gap you've recognized, show that these are solutions and recommendations you think would actually help to address that issue. And most of the time, really, you would whether or not full or partial, you would get some good funding. I mean, before you then think of looking for external funding opportunities, or if you're going to take a loan, depending on what your debt appetite is, So that's just one thing I thought to point out. I guess it's probably different. People, people typically say the UK schools are a bit tight-fisted in terms of money. So that's why people typically will have to look for like external funding. And Bemisola did a very good job in actually just telling us how the Shivling scholarship works. So that's what I would say in terms of like funding for the US schools. Most schools actually require to write an essay. So put your best foot forward, start to think of something you're actually going to write. Don't just write anything generic. I had a friend then who wrote something about the SEC in Nigeria, and that was also when this whole consumer protection issues was actually the issues were actually propping up. So it was something really interesting. I know I was privy to actually read her essay because she wanted some input. So people think outside the box. So that may sound cliche, but kind of think outside the box. It mustn't even really be something happening in Nigeria. It could be a global issue, right? Things like climate change. I have a friend who got into Harvard and she wrote about green funding, right? Drawing experiences from UK and the US and how that can, impact and help us in Nigeria to solve some of these issues that are, currently bedeviling our electricity sector. And she got into Harvard. So that's one thing I know for the US schools, right? They will actually look for in terms of giving you a scholarship. In terms of work, I don't know what work really you would have from school that will help you to kind of, fund your tuition and living expense. I'm not too sure. Even if you probably get something, it may not honestly be enough for your tuition. At best, it can just help you, for living expense, or probably if you want to like vacation during summer or go to the stores and grab, a new pair of shoe or bag. But I'm not too sure about tuition. But for me, I actually worked with a professor at the NYU Stern Business School. And, of course, the money was good. But I did that actually because I wanted experience, US experience, because I know that, in terms of kind of delving into the market, employers are actually looking to see what you did beyond even like, courses you took. They're looking to see if you kind of worked already in the US. I mean, sometimes our Nigerian experience kind of may be limiting, I guess, but they're already trying to see like, do you have US experience? So that was one thing for me in terms of like looking for a research assistant position, or just even looking for any position that, was available at centers at NYU. And I guess Caleb can actually, he's probably not a panelist, but at your spare time, just speak to him and he'll tell you that that's something that's actually really very, very helpful. So the money is good, yeah, but I would think that if you're looking for work opportunities, look for it if you're keen on staying back in the US, in the UK, in Canada, wherever, you have the opportunity to school, because it's actually very helpful when you go for interviews and, these prospective employers see that you've actually done something, or they've seen that you've been able to publish a paper, or you're an editor, for a particular journal or an area of law that's, kind of interests you, and it's probably what you're applying for. So the money may be good. I'm not too sure it may be helpful in terms of your tuition, because I'm not too sure it's probably much, but it will help sustain you, obviously. But beyond even the money, just look at the prospects after you're done, schooling, and how that may actually, better position you above your competitors, looking for job opportunities. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Viola, and thank you, Nifemi. I think one thing they're both in agreement in relation to is the fact that you have to like really make a strong application, and reaching out to people also helps. So we'll be going on to the next segment, which Chioma will be handling, and just inform members of our audience that they can please send in their questions, and would also be asking members of the panel as the rest of the program proceeds. Thank you. Over to you, Chioma.
Thank you, Gregory. So we've covered ground, a lot of ground actually, with most of the questions that we've had already. So I think it was appropriate for us to move to life after graduate school. So our questions here are not so many, but it's basically about how early after your program did you start to apply for jobs? And for those who decided to stay back, what was the process of requalification like? So for my first question, I'll be asking Mitch, because, well, Mitch already explained his own journey. So how early into your program did you start applying for jobs? And were they like career fairs that you attended whilst in uni that helped you transition smoothly from being a student to being an employee? So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Shoma. And I would just bifurcate this because I would expect that other panelists may also speak about obtaining jobs abroad. Now, when I was going to school, I have a very unique path in the sense that I never really wanted to live abroad. I have a clear idea of what I want to do in Nigeria, and I was more or less in a hurry to return back, right? I just never saw myself being anywhere else but here. As a result of that, when I was proceeding to do my LLM, I was already trying to find opportunities back in Nigeria. And I didn't really know anybody in Nigeria. And, for me, it was critical for me to be able to, when I return, right, immediately start working at the very highest levels such that I get the technical expertise that I want. So one of the things that helped me, right, was that while I was at the LSE, I served as the director of the Africa Summit. Basically, the Africa Summit is a flagship of the Africa Center in the LSE, and every year they bring together the leading business leaders on the African continent, as well as policymakers, to discuss about some of the critical issues facing the continent. As the director, I was given a front row seat in the sense that I then was able to interact with many of these business leaders who were African, some with strong links to Nigeria, but within my zone, which at the time was London. One of the people I met and I forged a very good relationship with, he's a partner at Latham and Watkins, and he works a lot on Africa. And after that, we grew a strong mentor relationship. Over the course of several coffee breaks, at his office where he invited me, he then asked me what my future plans were. And I told him that I wanted to return to Nigeria. So what he did was that when I was then ready to return to Nigeria for law school, he did an introductory mail for me to Aswe at B&I, Benga Ayebody at Aluko, and Professor Ajayi at Alanu Ajayi. And those converted to me getting internships and eventually in my job that I currently have at Alanu Ajayi. Now, this was networking that was forged outside of the continent, but gave me a soft landing when I was returning here. What's the lesson? The lesson is very simple. While you're in school, right, getting the best grades is extremely important because that's what you're selling in the job market. However, there's so many opportunities that you will be exposed to, right, as a student in many of these institutions that you might not be exposed to subsequently for a longer period of time. School is your stage. The extracurricular things you do while in school, right, can often convert into significant leads that will help for your career. So many of the contacts that I got from many of these business leaders at the time, where they were seeing us execute something that was purely student-led, has continued to help me now and is of course backed up with the substance of the work I do. That's one way. Another aspect of it is in respect of student fairs. So I also got the opportunity to interview with quite a couple of law firms in the City of London at the time. And while I didn't take any of those offers up, it was the case that a number of times it was the fact that, especially schools that are, it doesn't have to always be the fact that you're an Ivy League school, but sometimes about the location. So I'm sure, Obina might allude to this, right? When your school is in a place like New York or your school is in London, right? It is just consequential that a number of the leading law firms, a number of the leading organizations will be attending your school's career fairs. It's not a situation where you go into there just unprepared and expecting someone like a silver chariot to just come and offer you a job. I think one thing that helped me was that I had been opportune to interact with a lot of employment, should I say, career-focused people at the time, such that I had developed a very good elevator pitch. And what is an elevator pitch? 2 minutes, you're with Dangote. What are you going to say that is going to stand you out and ensure you get the next meeting? Might not be about getting you the job at that time, but just enough to give you a good enough impression such that you have the person in your network. I think that it is important taking on board some of the lessons that Bemi Sola mentioned about your STAR technique in answering questions, taking on board some of the things that Emenike mentioned about treating your life as a project, explaining the phases of your life, how you got there, what you're trying to achieve. I think it's important for you to begin to think about how you can narrow that down into a 5-minute conversation, such that when you are opportune to discuss with people that may be able to consequentially help your career, you're able to have a great elevator pitch. And remember, a number of times the opportunities you would have while you're in school, while you're abroad, while you're in the center of these cities where people are looking for you, are not opportunities that may often come run of the mill the way they come while you're in school. Final thing I want to say is that a number of organizations, particularly abroad, and this is speaking from some of my friends who decided to take a different career path than I did, is the case that sometimes, yes, grades are fantastic, but the truth of the matter is that you're in a global market. And because you're in a global market, it is the case that there are quite a number of people who have similar grades that you do. So it's about what do you have that distinguishes yourself. So you want to try and start thinking about how you can do things extracurricularly that you like to make yourself an interesting candidate, to make yourself an interesting person. And the reason is very simple. In your career journey, there are 3 critical phases. There's a phase when you come in and you're a junior and everybody's trying to teach you so that you have technical expertise. There's a phase where you have enough technical expertise and you begin to supervise. And there's the phase where you are trying to graduate yourself into a partner, a business leader. And at that point in time, you're relying more and more on your soft skills in order to convert networks into business. A number of you going into grad school now already have possibly 4 years, 5 years experience working. So really and truly, you're not trying to position yourself as that incoming person that needs technical expertise. You're positioning yourself as someone who's coming at a relatively senior, mid-senior level, and who in a few years' time, you want to be that business leader that your desired company would want to take a bet on you, such that you're that person who converts briefs in the future, becomes a rainmaker, and becomes a business leader in your own right. Those social skills are not things that sometimes you would have the opportunity to develop when you are spending 100 hours a week working at the top New York law firm and just grinding in the work. Sometimes it's the networks you're going to make while you're in school that are going on to be the ones who are leading FTSE 100 companies. And you want to ensure that you begin to build those networks right from that time when you're in school. Secondly, that is the time when you're able to ensure that beyond the academics, you've been able to demonstrate that, look, this is my passion. These are some other things that I'm passionate about. And these are some of the things that I've been able to execute when I've been given that leadership, even at the school level. And finally, it's also that time when you're also trying to, study some other things in depth, such that you're not just the person that knows, this is how a transaction works. This is how a financing agreement works. But because you have gotten the depth, what I mean is this, right? When you're in school, there's a difference between saying, I want to pass an exam and get a distinction, and I really want to understand this. University affords you that opportunity to really understand this, such that when you're in that interview and, they then give you, questions about, oh, hey guys, how do we go about this finance agreement? You explain that finance agreement, you explain the basis for the finance agreement, and you explain how it can work in different distinct markets. Then they begin to understand that, okay, this is not just a run-on-the-mill paper pusher. This is someone who is going to shape the market, because the type of firms that you're trying to apply to are firms that are trying to shape the market. Finally, always remember your unique selling point beyond your academics, beyond everything. A lot of you here are African, right? And especially if you're working in the market in New York and you're working in markets in London, a number of times your firms will want to position you as that person in their African markets. So don't shy away from understanding the continent. Don't shy away from understanding the market trends about the continent as well, such that, look, everybody else is great in financing, everybody else is great in corporate law. However, who understands the trends of the market for the future? I mean, I'm sorry to take too much of your time, but someone I would like you all to read about, in your own spare time, is a guy at White & Case. He's a partner. His name is Joshua Seol, and he's basically the rainmaker for White & Case London. Now, this guy, he's based in London. He's Ghanaian, and he has been able to leverage himself as the leading partner in White & Case based on his African connections and based on his ability to generate African-related work. I'm not saying that you have to do that. I'm just saying that you have to be able to create your own blue ocean where the competition is less and where you are the business leader in that aspect. Remember that everything about a job, it's a business decision. So nobody's running a charity here, right? Everybody's just trying to see, is taking you on, Viola, the best business decision for this company? Is taking you on, MNK, the best decision for this company? And if they're able to see that, and if you're able to perfectly articulate that, then really it should be a walk in the park. So, I mean, that is what I was able to leverage for myself, and I'm still leveraging. And that is what I would say that I would like to leave for people to take on board. Thanks, Choma.
Thank you very much, Mitch. So our next question, and that's extremely helpful for people who are just about to begin their postgraduate studies and those who are about to start applying. So I find that very helpful. So thank you for your insights. Our next question is directed to Ike and Obinna as well. And it's about those who would like to stay in the jurisdiction where they have studied and what the procedure for that is like. So what is the procedure for, did you have to requalify to get your current jobs? And did things like the job fair, again, those sorts of things help? Basically, what has that journey been like for you, and what would your advice be for others who are looking to undertake similar journeys?
Okay, I could start. So I think I don't want to overflog this issue, but then just for the benefit of those who are still in school, if you intend to move to the US or to London or wherever, and you intend to stay back there, then you probably want to have really good grades. Because here's the thing though, there are tons of law firms say in the US now, for example, but then not every single law firm sponsors you for the H-1B and then subsequently a green card in the US. And the ones who do will typically almost always recruit from the top schools like Harvard, Columbia, NYU, So it just makes things really, really easy. So I had someone reach out to me. She's at a state school, a school which I would consider a very good school. And she is trying to apply to SCADing. And so I spoke to a senior associate who works in the SCADing office in that state. And the senior associate got back to me, and she said that SCADing typically doesn't recruit from that school. They typically recruit from the so-called top 7 schools in the US. That's their recruiting ground. And so it's really good to keep up your grades. But then if, as I said earlier, you do not have stellar grades, then you have to be at the top of your game, right? You have to, really work hard, network, bring in. And here's the good thing about these law firms, even though they really want you to have good grades, they will not hesitate to look over your grades to give you a job offer if they feel that you will be able to bring something to the table, which as a first-year associate, you probably won't be able to bring in any business, right? But then you have the drive, you're willing to learn, you're teachable, and in the long term, you will be a worthwhile investment. And so if you intend to move to the US or whatever, your grade should be at the top. Your grade should be a priority for you. I'm sorry, what's the second part of the question? I didn't write that down.
I think that about covers it. And if you don't mind, would like to direct a quick question to Dr. Reginald because he needs to drop off the call. Thank you. Thank you, Obinna. So, Dr. Reginald, our question is for the participants who would like to come back to Nigeria after they are done with their postgraduate studies like you have done, and they would like to find out what influenced your decision to do that, and what are they, like, how best do they optimize their experience with the postgraduate studies, and how do they leverage on that to get the best jobs in Nigeria? And would you say that it is a worthwhile move to make? Is it a strategic move to make?
Thank you very much. And I do apologize. Just I need to leave shortly. If I could start with the last part of the question, whether it's a worthwhile to make, it's strategic. It all depends really, I think, on what you want to do, what your long-term plans are. Right? If we start off from the very beginning, we have to recognize that the economic situation of the country at the moment is not what you want it to be, right? And on that basis, look, for many people, it would make sense to stay back. Let's be honest. Also about that, and that's primarily because I'm a member of the NBA Remission committee, right? Fighting very hard to see how we can change things for many of our colleagues, but recognize that in terms of your financial payouts, it's usually a difficult conversation to justify returning to Nigeria on the basis of what you are likely to earn when you return. And then just all the issues that the country is currently dealing with, which we need not to get into. However, having said all that, there's still a strong case for what you want to do. And what your long-term prospects are looking like. So, as Mitch said, as an example, there are people who, like him, understand very clearly what their long-term plans are, and they see Nigeria as a place to do that. And for such people, it could be a sensible, strategic idea to return to Nigeria. For some others, the plan may be more long-term in nature, where, you know what, let me get all the experience and get the exposure that I need now. And in the next however many years, the country is looking better. I am more equipped to return to Nigeria to contribute meaningfully to society, and then I make a move to come back at that time. Every option is valid, to be very honest. In terms of my personal journey, my return to Nigeria was more for personal reasons than not. So I was on the first year of my doctorate when I took the decision, and at the time I just gotten married, and I really was starting to think about what my long term would be. I'd worked in Nigeria, I'd done law firms in London, I'd done law firm in Paris. It seemed to me that well, for personal reasons, I'm very strong on family, for instance. If I'm to continue with the intensity that I would typically bring to my work, my family will take a back seat. And I knew that wasn't something that I was prepared to compromise on, right? So it was a decision really around two things. One was where I was going to live, and two was the type of work I was going to do. Taking all those factors into account, it looked like a law firm at the time in the UK. And I'd had, even in course my PhD, I'd had a series of interviews with a number of them. But it looked like that really wasn't going to work in terms of trying to merge a family with possibly a child and a PhD and work. It looked like that was just not going to be a feasible option. So ultimately, looked around, made applications into my current job right now. Things all worked out, and I got in, and here I am. But could things have played out differently? They really could have, right? One major consideration in this decision, of course, was the fact that in addition to my work, I had to create time for my studies. And like I said previously, I knew for a fact that I couldn't take this train of a DPhil in a place like Oxford together with working in a law firm in the UK. And if you're starting a family, you know that you need the financial resources to make that work, right? So all those factors came together to determine the decision to return to Nigeria and to move away from law firm practice into where I am currently. Like I said, I know that these factors will play out very different for different people. What is perhaps most important for you as an individual is to properly understand what your personal situation, what your personal circumstances are, and what your priorities are really. If getting to the top of your career as early as possible is very important to you, by all means. After your postgraduate education, look for all the opportunities you can find to stay back in the UK, get into a solid Magic Circle law firm in the UK, in New York, in Canada, wherever you are, and build up your career from there. If you decide to take a long-term view and come back into Nigeria subsequently, all the better for you, right? But if you have other factors that require you to come back into Nigeria, you want to join into politics in Nigeria, you want to have a more direct relationship with how to move the country forward today rather than in 20 years' time. And that requires you to be in Nigeria by all means, but you only have to be deliberate about it. Be careful not to use other people's situations as templates for yourself because their circumstances were very different from yours. And be strategic. And ultimately, with all that in mind and with good luck, with prayers, with God by your side, even if to come back to Nigeria can ultimately work for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reginald. That is extremely helpful. Thank you for your time. Obinna, I'd like to, okay, yes, you were done speaking, so I would like to direct the same question I asked Obinna to, okay, and it's basically about like staying back, and maybe Eminike should also just jump in very briefly for about a minute or two on that. What is that process like? Do you have to requalify? Yes, basically, do you have to requalify, take some courses to requalify, or can you work without that? Or basically, how do you break into that new market as a Nigerian trained lawyer who has now taken postgraduate studies in a foreign country?
Well, I think qualification will only come to play when qualification will only come to play when it relates to getting a job. So if you are qualified to maybe get a job for a law firm, the kind of qualification they are looking for, the kind of candidate they are looking for, or whatever company you are trying to look for, that is where the issue of qualification, maybe your grades or whatever you've done, will come into play. But that is not the major thing. I've seen people who secured job, who after their graduation, they secured job in US, high-paying job that they offer that came mouth-watering offers, but they're not able to proceed because we just know that securing offer or having whatever you can do is not just enough. You need to have the legal background. I mean, you need to have the requisite paperwork to be able to stay back in the United States to work, right? That is all we have now. You need to have your paper. That is the major issues most people face. And that is why the first advice I normally give to people whenever someone comes to me for choice of his LLM or whatever graduate program you're doing, I'll ask you, what do you want to do? Do you want to stay back? Do you want to stay back after you are done with your program? Right? If the answer is in the affirmative that maybe, yes, I want to stay back in the country, you might just have to, first, another thing you have to consider is that what is the immigration or what is the immigration process like? What are the laws of the country like when it comes to staying back, the immigration laws? How receptive or how friendly are they to foreigners or international students? You know? So like Ubina said when he was talking, most companies here might hire you and file for you the H-1B visa. That is for you to be qualified to have your paperwork to work in the United States. But however, we also know that, I don't know now, but I know during Trump regime, Trump did something to tighten it up, that it wasn't as easy as it used to be before now, you know? So during the Trump regime, that the mere fact that you got a job or the mere fact that your company files for you H-1B is not even guaranteed that you are going to get it. During Trump made it more like a balloting stuff, and they give precedence and priority to people who are in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. if we are not just mentioning words and all those on the America, when it comes to students staying back or people who get their jobs staying back, is a little bit more, is more difficult than what we have in Canada, where people can stay back and find their PR and find this thing, or UK, where somebody can get a job and they fight for you and you stay back. So, but mostly, you never can tell people, you don't have to wait to figure it out before you take the first step. There are people who come here who get their jobs and the company fight for their H1B, they get their H1B. So I'll tell people is that you take the first step, you just come, but mostly the major thing is how do you get your paperwork. So not necessarily about qualification or do you have to write exams. You don't have to write an exam, but if you want to practice as a lawyer, you just know in New York or in any state in America, you need to get qualified to practice as a lawyer. That one is certain. So the qualification is for you to get qualified to practice in whatever area of law or in whatever to qualify as a lawyer to practice. But the mere fact that you pass New York bar or whatever state bar you choose to write does not without more qualify you to practice to stay in America and have your work permit and work. I think that's it.
Thank you very much. Iminike, over to you, please. And if you could address things like taking the bar exam for the states and things like that, that would be extremely helpful as well.
Thank you very much, Choma. I think the previous speakers have made, I've done a really good job, talking about what the realities are, like in terms of qualifying, in terms of having the necessary permits to work. Ike and Reginald have addressed those points really finely. And I think when it comes to qualifying, like in terms of being qualified to practice in a jurisdiction, whether or not you need to qualify, whether or not you should aspire to qualify, it depends on a couple of factors in my view, right? It depends on, just like Mitch said, what do you want ultimately? In the long term, what do you want? And if I can seize this opportunity to say, it's not necessarily a bad idea to aspire to return to Nigeria. It's not at all. People's journey take different trajectories. It takes different dimensions. I've seen people who finished their postgraduate studies and returned to Nigeria, practiced and returned to whichever jurisdiction, whichever major jurisdictions they wanted to stay back in. I've seen people who move back and then return again. It's pretty fluid if you think about it. It's like I've seen people who started up their career in Nigeria and eventually moved to London, moved to New York, moved to Ontario, moved to whatever jurisdiction that is as active in the practice of their specialty as they would want, right? So it depends on what you want to do. The truth really is that to assess certain opportunities, right, you might find it better to qualify, especially if you're looking to work. Obviously, if you're looking to work at a law firm, you might find not. And I'm being very deliberate when I say you might find it better, because I've had friends who join law firms without qualifying to practice in the jurisdictions. Their Nigeria qualification was deemed enough, and they were hired as foreign counsel. Quite a number of my friends have told that part, and till date have not had to qualify in those jurisdictions. There've also been scenarios where the law firm you want to join, make it a condition in your employment letter or in your terms of engagement that you must qualify, which is more often the case, right? The law firm will make it a requirement that you must qualify. It might take a different dimension if you're going to join an in-house establishment of a company, or you're going to join, a sovereign and or a multilateral, for instance. Those institutions might not need you to qualify. Some of them might still require that you qualify, but some of the ones that are very multinational that operate across jurisdictions may not require that you qualify, obviously, because they would deem your local Nigeria qualifications to be enough. But some of them might still require that you qualify. So it depends on two factors then, if you look at it holistically. What do you want? And what kind of institutions will you be looking at? Assuming you want to stay back in a jurisdiction, what kind of institutions will you be looking at? More often than not, if you're looking at a law firm, you would be required to qualify. It's more of an exception to join a law firm and not have to qualify in the jurisdiction, right? So if you're looking to work in New York, most firms will require that you qualify there. Some firms will require that you qualify in the UK if you're looking to work in London. The same with Canada or whatever other jurisdiction that you'll be looking to qualify in. So it depends on the institution you are looking to join. And it also depends ultimately on what you want for yourself. In terms of what the requirements are, if you are the most popular bar like that, at least based on my own experience that I see people take is the New York bar, which is a really daunting exam, right? But it's something that at the time you're applying for your postgraduate studies, you have it in mind from the word go that you're going to sit for the bar exam there, and you begin to plan for it. Daunting, not just because of the essential demands of the exam, the passing requirements of the exam itself, but also because of the administrative requirements, the documents you need to submit to confirm eligibility and all of that. So it's something you want, and I think it's almost the same, if I'm not mistaken, with most other jurisdictions. So if you're looking to qualify in a different jurisdiction, it's something that you really have to consider and conclude on as early as possible and start the process, because you almost always have to send your documents ahead of time. You have to send your documents for them to confirm that you're eligible. Good thing is we're a common law country, right? So if you are looking to qualify in a common law jurisdiction, which fortunately the key destinations for Nigerian students are mostly common law jurisdictions, the US, UK, Canada. So if you're looking to qualify in those jurisdictions, the requirements are a bit minimal in your case, right? But you do still have to start on time, front load all your documents. It's always helpful to speak to someone who has qualified in that jurisdiction before you start the process, because they can guide you on what you need to put together in terms of documentation, in terms of like other requirements, just so you don't, because it's not something I can speak specifically to, because they may vary. They do vary from one jurisdiction to the other, but it's always best to speak to someone who is already qualified or who has started the qualification process there to guide you, to tell you this is what you have to do, this is when you have to do it. Because for instance, for the New York bar, you have to send your documents, I know, like 5 months or 3 months ahead of time. It's like it's something quite elaborate. You have to start on time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Minka. I think there are a few questions directed to you in the chat, so if you could address them as well. But then our next questions, and we're rounding off now because we're pressed for time, are directed to Ife and Daniel, and they're about like, what are the prospects of a lawyer with an MBA? And a lot of people are interested in knowing what those prospects are outside the legal space, for instance. So they would like to know that. So maybe we should take Ife first, and then Daniel, or Daniel and then Ife. It depends on what you prefer.
Okay, Daniel, I've been going first now. Do you want to jump in?
So prospects for lawyers in an MBA. So I would say people go for MBA for different reasons. And you find that as you probably start the program, I have some classmates that are going for an MBA because probably they need it in their workplace to get promotion. Some come for the network, but also a majority of people come because they want to transition from law or from whatever degree whatever background they're coming from. So with respect to prospects, it depends on why you want to do an MBA. That would largely determine your prospects as to plans after the MBA and whatnot. So for those that, I know some lawyers that are bagging an MBA because they want to go back to law, and probably they just need an understanding of how to better advise their clients with respect to the business side of their operations and not just the legal side. So that's for someone that went for an MBA because of that reason, your prospects will be probably going back to a law firm, or probably going back to the law firm you're coming from, or trying to get a law firm in the US or whatever jurisdiction you are at. So with respect to that, I think, so there's something they always say that with an MBA, you always get a job. That's like something they typically say. But I don't know any lawyer that has gone back to a law firm, but I want to believe that it will not be that difficult to like get into any law firm, depending on the jurisdiction you're coming from, with your MBA degree and with the knowledge you would have gotten. So with respect to that, going back to a law firm, I'm not really sure. Probably if I can speak to that, but I know that if you want to probably go back to the law firm you're coming from, it shouldn't be a problem. But if you want to go to any law firm in the US or in Canada, depending on what the restrictions are, probably you might need to take the bar exam in that particular country. But depending on that, I think it should be fairly okay to go back to that. But for those that want to transition, that's an area I can speak to, because for me, that was the reason why I decided to go for an MBA. With respect to transition, I would say because of the beauty of the program, as an MBA candidate, you're trained to work in any area of the company. So they're looking at you from being the CEO to CFO to COO, to starting your own company, to being a manager, to operations. So with respect to that, if you're transitioning from law, you can work in any job role that you want to, depending on now. So for example, what they do in my school, for example, is that they take you on a career path of like 3 or 4 months. So at the moment, I'm working with a career coach, even first of all, having to identify. So another thing they understand is that people come to an MBA not knowing what they want to do. It's very okay. They always say that, oh, we know a lot of you are still trying to figure out exactly what it is you want to do, because you don't want to go back. Some don't want to go back to their previous jobs, but they don't know what they want to do in the future. So there's that opportunity. So they pair you with a career coach. So you start this discovery and analysis type phase. And that's where I'm at the moment, because there's still a lot of opportunities and I'm not sure which one I want to do. So I'm at the career discover stage where I'm at. So after you've done that process, then they start doing like, careers in consulting, careers in entertainment, careers. So they do careers for practically almost all the industries, and they try to take you through how to the role of an MBA in those career paths. So I think the prospects are very strong and very solid, to be very honest. So for example, I think the class of 2022, because of COVID, they had just 735, and all 735 of them got a job after the MBA program. So, and I think the latest person, according to the report, got a job on the 14th of June. That was just some months before they finished. So I think it depends on what you want. Essentially, I think I would just, in rounding off, I would just say it depends on what you want. The opportunities are endless. You can do whatever you want to do with an MBA degree. So depending on what you now want to do you want to do fintech? Do you want to do consulting? And another thing is most of your classmates are from those backgrounds you want to go into. So that's even makes it easier. So if you want to go into fintech, you have classmates that are already probably VPs in fintech companies, but just needed to maybe get promotions to CEO. Some even want it just for the pride and the brag that, I'm an MBA Harvard, MBA Oxford, or whatever it is. So you find out that you can even leverage on your classmates to get the next job you want to get. So yeah, depending on what you want, I think the opportunities are limitless.
Okay, thanks, Daniel.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Oh, sorry.
I just thought to, jump in so that, if you had like a few more questions for other panelists. But yeah, thank you, Daniel. I'm totally aligned because we did go through this process together. So I think we are very aligned on a lot of things. One thing I should say is the beauty about the MBA itself is it gives you options, right? And I think for me, that was one of the driving factors towards getting there. The options are really endless, right? So while there are a lot of lawyers on this call, I can tell you for free that in my class, we're over 350. We have doctors, right, who pivoted from, medicine to do an MBA. One of my classmates was in the Olympics, right, recently in Tokyo. So you just have a wide variety of people all coming to find different kinds of options for themselves. So you being a lawyer doesn't necessarily make you different or unique. It just means that you're also, bringing your own diversity to the class and looking out for, the kinds of options that, the MBA would give you. There's so many things you can do, There are a couple of typical career paths post-MBA. So you find that some people want to go into consulting, so work with like what we call MBBs, McKinsey, Bain, BCG. You find that a lot of people want to go to investment banking. You find a lot of people want to go into tech. There are very typical paths like that. Tech as well is very, is budding now. But there are unusual paths. There are people that want to go into, the FMCG space, anything, right? It gives you options. That's exactly how I want you to look at it. It's a degree that, can set you up for anything. You don't have to have a finance background before, to say, I want to now go into investment banking. You don't have to have done tech to now say, post MBA, I want to go into tech, right? And likewise, the other, disciplines, because the program itself, is designed, it's a generalist program. So a lot of times it's designed to help you, acquire and pick up new skills, different from wherever you were coming from. And so when you're picking up skills like that for a year, for 18 months, for 2 years, you can literally do anything after, right? So I think, for lawyers on this call, I want you to think about it like that. Just to add also, Daniel mentioned, after the MBA, if you're thinking of going back to your law firm, I would tell you for free, the process is too rigorous and too daunting. And there are much easier ways, and how do I put it? There are less strenuous processes, right, in terms of postgrad degrees, if you want to go back to a law firm than going through to do an MBA. I'm just telling you for free. If you do decide to go on this journey, you would see that it is not the easiest, particularly we as lawyers who are coming from a non-traditional and a non-quantitative background. There's the GMAT, GRE that you must take for quite a lot of schools. So you see that there are different aspects to it. And if you want to go back to a law firm, maybe you want to be looking at other degrees that don't, will not be taking that much out of you. Just something I thought to share. But thank you so much, Hands and Bridges, for having me. I mentioned that I had to hop off in a bit. Thank you guys so much. Thank you to all the panelists. I do hope that I've been able to add some value. Yeah, and thanks again, guys.
Thank you, Fair.
Thank you, Fair.
Thanks for joining us and honoring our invitation. Bye. So we just have a couple of questions from participants from Zoom, YouTube, and we just want to direct them to some of our speakers. So a question for Gbemi's attention. I don't know whether she has addressed it in the chat box, but someone is saying that for scholarships like the Shevlin Scholarship, you're required to return back to Nigeria, your home country, depending on where you're from. And what if an awardee wants to stay back? What can the person do? What can the person do to waive, being required to go back to their home country? And are there successful instances of people who have gotten Shevlin applications and have not gone, Shevlin awards and have not gone back to their home country? Thank you.
Greg, if I may, she's just answered the question on the chat.
Yeah, so I've answered the question.
Done that.
Yeah, that was what I was going to mention.
So thank you so much.
All right, thank you. So another question for Viola then. The question is in relation to visa applications. So people get visa approvals to go for their master's degree. What can the person do, like when let's say your stay in the country has sort of expired and you have to go, like what's the visa application like, when you've decided that, I've gone for either an MBA or an LLM, but I want to stay back. How's the process like? Thank you.
Okay. I think Obina Anike talked about that a bit, but just to add, so in the US, typically to stay back, you would need a H-1B visa, right? Which is a work authorization for you to be able to work and to stay back legally. I know that it's a bit of a daunting task to actually get a job first, and then get that job that's actually willing to sponsor you. But the good thing is, if you get into a reputable organization, either you're in-house or with a law firm, or if you're actually with an international organization, I think it's actually even a different work visa you would need. But let me limit it to a law firm, or if you're in-house. If you get into a reputable organization, typically, they would file for you, right? Particularly if they've tested your work and through fire, and they see that, you're a value add to them. It's a different ball game, as Ike said, in terms of, the process of selection, because it's a ballot system. People are kind of hopeful that with the Biden administration, there will be a more definitive way of selecting, H-1B applicants. But until then, it's actually a lottery process. But I know that with COVID, right? And people say with every bad thing, sometimes there may be a good thing that come out of it. With COVID, organizations are a bit flexible. People are actually kind of working from home. And the good thing about the H-1B visa is that you can actually apply, without necessarily being in country. So if you're able to get a job opportunity just shortly before you're done with school or during your OPT period, for people who don't know what OPT is the 1 year after you're done with school. So that's actually your option. They call it optional practical training, but you could have the opportunity to work, right, before you then transition to a H-1B visa or a green card. I mean, depending on what visa type you're transitioning to. I mean, if you're able to get a job, from what I understand, and I have friends who attended NYU who probably didn't get selected the first round, but they got a job. The organizations were flexible enough for them to continue working remotely. And because the H-1B visa, you actually don't need to be in country to, get selected. Organizations are willing to then refile, right, for them. Or you're able to get a consulting job, right, not necessarily as a full staff, and you're able to do it, virtually from any part of the world. So I guess with COVID, things are a bit flexible. The prayer really and truly is that COVID would, leave the surface of this earth very soon. So I guess things would go back to status quo. So the question is, will organizations still be flexible enough? Well, I guess most organizations in the US are kind of, are thinking that post-COVID, right, they would actually still be flexible in terms of their work pattern. So it's something actually one could actually explore. And like I said, once you're value add to any organization, really and truly, once you bring your best foot forward, a law firm, you're in-house, you're with an, IO, international organization, typically they could really be very flexible. And if you're with a law firm, for example, a multinational, they have offices outside of the US, right? So they could move you to like the UK office, they could move you to Canada. I have a friend who works with Coca-Cola, right? He didn't get his H-1B visa and he came back to Nigeria to join the Coca-Cola office, and they're actually working on his L1 visa, right? To then bring him back as an executive. So, I mean, it's just really very flexible. So sometimes if you're actually targeting to get a job, I know it's not so easy, but maybe look at jobs that have offices outside of the US, so that in any event, the selection process is positive or it's not favorable in the first stance, you're actually able to then move to like a Paris office, the London office, the Canadian office, or even Nigeria, depending on, how the organization is structured. So I think that's a bit of flexibility. That should kind of be like your priority in terms of looking for an opportunity. Look for opportunities that have offices outside of the US. Otherwise, depending on what value you bring to an organization, they may actually be very willing to make concessions for you, to actually make sure that you then get back into the country to continue working with them. So that's what I'll say. But I mean, I'll tell you for free, probably don't overstay your visa. I'll tell you for free, because the US, they keep records. And if you overstay your visa and you leave and you're trying to come back in, they have everything on their system. And so it will always be a problem for you to then come back in. So just always, when you get in, put your best foot forward, show them that you're a value add, and really and truly, I guess, at the end of the day, eventually, if you want to stay back in the country, especially US, UK, and Canada, as we've all established, are a bit more, the immigration rules are a bit more flexible and receptive. But for the US, if you want to value add, typically your organization may make concessions for you and see that you come back into the US, if assuming that's where you actually want to domicile. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Viola.
Hi, Gregory. Hi, Gregory. Hi, Gregory.
Hello?
Can you hear me, Gregory? Can I chime in quickly? Because I see that this question about the bond with respect to Shivni scholarship is like generating a lot. So I also understand that there are some people who are not on the Zoom call to be able to see the response I'm giving. So I just want to clarify it quickly, please, briefly. I also understand that currently the applications are on, so people want to know if they should apply or not. So the Shivni scholarship, one of the primary criteria is that you must return to your country for minimum 2 years on completion of your program in the United Kingdom. I'm currently back in Nigeria. It is a bond of the scholarship. I had opportunities I could leverage while I was in the UK. I could, a lot of magic cycle law firms I could apply to, but I didn't take, there was no point because I know I signed a bond. So there's a bond you sign when you are giving the scholarship to say, I'm returning back to my country because you were selected as a future leader. So they say, spend 1 year in the UK for the masters and come back and effect the change in your country. So it's not forever, it's just for 2 years. I have people who have been back in Nigeria and I'm back in the UK, either for job reasons or for PhD further studies. So you have to decide that first at this point, if you really want to apply, if you are willing to abide by that bond. Like for a major example, I remember a particular person years back who studied in one of the top schools in the UK, and then he got a job offer, immediately got into the school. from a Magic Cycle law firm. He was with a top tier law firm in Nigeria before he left for the UK. Before he started the program even in the UK, during the open day, he got an associate role with thousands of pounds. You can imagine how juicy the offer is. But he never told them that he had a scholarship which had a bond. They waited for him to complete the program in this school for after a year, and he was supposed to resume the role. When he wanted to resume, he went to the Home Office in London. And when he got there, he told them, I have this job offer. I want to continue to stay back in the UK to continue to take on this role. And the Home Office told him, you have a bond. He's already appearing on your document. You have to return home. And he said, oh, in the UK office of this firm, I'm going to be doing things that will impact on my country, on Nigeria, because I'm going to be in charge of the African desk. He tried to make a case. You know, we are lawyers now, so we try to argue, our case, but Home Office told him, okay, the way forward is write to the embassy in Nigeria. If they can allow you to stay, then you can stay back. And we know how it's going to end. By the time he wrote Nigeria, they already had a standard template of letters they sent for that purpose. It wasn't even addressed. It was just written to whom it may concern. And it was sent back to him that you have to return home. He came back to Nigeria. He was frustrated. It was especially when there were no opportunities to look out for. He got back to the top law firm. He was back here in Nigeria before he left. But he wasn't feeling it anymore, because imagine such a juicy offer and just lost. It was like he lost that opportunity. But what did he do? Eventually, he got an internship somewhere. He was there for a while, and the bond expired. He's now back in the UK. As I speak with you, he's currently in the UK with one of the top tier law firms. The Magic Cycle law firms in the UK, and he got in as an associate. He's even now a senior counsel. So really, there is a bond. So if you are not willing to take that route, then maybe Shivni might not be the option for you if you want to stay back immediately in the UK. But if you want to be able to honor your bond, integrity reasons, it might not be for now. There might be people telling you there are ways around it. But no, it doesn't make sense if you get a prestigious scholarship like Shivni and then you are hiding after the scholarship because you want to stay back in the UK. Come back home, and then when you come back home, you can always go back to the UK. And in those 2 years, it doesn't mean you can't enter the UK at all. You could have programs, trainings, visits. You can always go to the UK. Like, I was selected for the African Arbitration Academy. So if we are to have our program physically in the UK next year, even if my bond had not expired, I can go there if COVID allows. So it doesn't mean you can't enter the UK at all. It's just that you can't have the status of a resident like you had when you were a student. So that's it. So the bond is a condition precedent for the scholarship. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bimi, and thank you to all our speakers.
Hi, Gregory.
Yes, hello?
Yeah, just to hop in, there was a point I was going to make earlier, and then I lost my train of thought. So someone asked, I think Chema asked a question about when you should begin applying for jobs if you intend to stay back in the US or the UK. So here's the deal. I personally, from my experience, I started applying for jobs as soon as I got my LLM admission. But here's the thing. At the time when I was applying for jobs, I was applying to jobs in Nigeria with the UN, with ECOWAS. I had a few interviews, and this was even before I arrived the US. So if you know that you want to stay back in the country to which you're headed for the graduate program, do not wait until you resume. As soon as you get admission, as soon as you've accepted your admission offer, you have everything, reach out to the office, to your career services or the Office of Professional Programs, whatever they call it. Reach out to them, send in your resume, your CV, whatever, the template you use to apply for the job. Send it out to them. They will help you to review it even before you start. And it's really good to be proactive, because by the time every other person resumes, so in the US, it's typically in July. So by July, August, when everyone is on campus, it becomes really, really difficult to have priority to, get your documents to the career services office, have them review your CV. So when I was in Nigeria, I had this very long CV listing out everything I had done. But then in the US, they just wanted one page. So if it's 2 pages, 3 pages, they just toss it out, and there is already this bias against foreign lawyers, so them looking at your CV alone already tells them that this is not even an American candidate or someone who has resided. So you want to put yourself in the best light possible. You want to position yourself in a light that is favorable to you and makes you look prepared. So right off the bat, send in your applications, review it, begin reaching out to people. I don't think anyone has, I think someone has mentioned this, but I think this is so important. Connect with as many people as possible. So if you're at one of the top law firms, you can, if you are close to a partner there and they have, say, gone to the country, the US, the UK, where you are about to go to, they might have friends at really good law firms here in the US, and they might be willing, if you have a really good relationship and the partner is a nice person, they might recommend you, which is a really good way to get in. I had friends who, while we were all running around, interviewing, they had offers already because they had recommendation. So before I came to the US, I always thought that, man no man only works in Nigeria and everything. But apparently knowing someone works everywhere, so network as much as possible, reach out to people, let people know your intentions. When I moved to the US, I wasn't dead set on staying back at the time, but then I was applying to jobs with the UN, ECOWAS back home, and I wasn't getting any return calls. I wasn't getting any offers. And so I had to broaden up my search, apply everywhere to companies in the US, to law firms, everything, because I did not want to finish my program and be without a job. So the earlier you start, the better. And I think everything everyone has said here can be brought down to one single word: preparation. It doesn't matter. And I think this is so important. It doesn't, of course, your grades matter, but regardless of what your past have been, every day is a new opportunity, And so if you are well prepared, you will be in a better position to take advantage of opportunities people who have, say, better references or better grades might not be able to take advantage of, just because you took the initiative to be well prepared and to be ready for opportunities. So thank you to everyone. Thank you to the panel, to the hosts, and to Hands and Bridges for hosting this very wonderful session. I hope I have been able to add a little value, and I wish you the very best to the applicants in your future endeavors.
Thank you, Obina.
Absolutely.
Tremendous value. Thank you. So we just want, I personally wanted to hear more from Nifemi. Okay, Nifemi has a hand raised. So Nifemi, and please, just before you speak, Nifemi, so we've come to an end and would like to close, but before we close, would also like all our speakers to just give us a final word, a minute, just not more than a minute, just give us an indication, to members of our audience, like generally what to expect in terms of, the application process, and any words of encouragement you can generally give. So Nifemi, in addition to your comments, could you also go ahead and give us your final statement on this?
Yeah, I was going to say that this would also go with my final comments. Thank you so much. Yeah, one last thing I wanted to add is take advantage of two things: campus recruitment and your career development office. It's very important because there are a lot of organizations, including multinationals, who come to schools just to pick like the best of the best students, which of course ties to why grades are important, especially when you go into the LLM program also. And they host like campus fairs and recruitment events. And from some of these events, you get like full-time jobs. So you want to pay attention to it and make sure that you attend campus recruitment events, and also the career development office. I think from school to school, it might be different, but I know that for my school, the career development office has been extremely helpful. I remember my first interview in Canada was with a multinational, and I wrote to the career development office to prep me for interview, and they were more than helpful, jumped on a Zoom call to literally pull me all through and just act like the interview, and it was very helpful, and I got the job. So leverage all of the resources you have in school while you have it, including campus recruitment events, and your career development office, whether reviewing CV, cover letter, or just preparing you for interviews. And final words would be, of course, first, thank you to the organizers of this event. And to everybody here, it's not unattainable as far as you can think, as high as you can imagine. It's undoable until it's done. But if every other person here has done it before, you can do even much more beyond your imagination. And with God, it's very attainable. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nifemi. Viola, if you have anything like your final words, and then we'll just go around the table and then we'll wrap things up. Thank you, Nifemi.
Thank you so much. I've actually learned a few things, actually being on this, being a panelist and actually just listening into some of the finest lawyers I know, as I said earlier. I mean, my final words, and I always, say this is something that has guided me right from undergrad till now as a lawyer. Just begin with the end in mind, right? Before you take any step, think through, look at the end goal. I mean, we've all alluded to that. Reginald, Mitch actually alluded to that. Think of why you're, embarking on this journey. A master's degree or an MBA is not just any other degree, right? There has to be some value add personally to you. So don't just do it because your friend is doing it, your colleagues are exiting the law firm. Do it because it's actually a stepping stone. So actually, when you have that, right, at the back of your mind, I think it will guide you in terms of just preparation. It will guide you in bringing your best foot forward, because you know that actually that's like the next best thing that's actually going to happen in your career. I wish everyone the best. I'm actually available on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out. And I'm really grateful to Caleb, who has actually been a good friend, and the rest of the Hands and Bridges team. Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Viola. Obinna has given us his last words, I think. Daniel, yours?
Yeah, thank you all for this session. Like Viola said, I also learned one or two things and I was taking notes actually. I hope Ife did not scare anyone when she said, oh, it's a very daunting process, etc. But I think, like Viola said, and like also, I think it was Inifemi that said it, yeah. So because it's doable, and that's something that I think everyone should have in mind. And particularly for me, one of the reasons why I wanted to do an MBA from HBS in particular was because I wanted to show people that if you want to do something, you can actually set your mind to it and achieve it. As at the time I was applying for the MBA program, I didn't work with any lawyer because there were no lawyers I could reach out to that had done an MBA. I was on LinkedIn. It was a lot, but I didn't find anybody. And I was like, you know what, let me start that trend and let me be that person that at least other people can look up to and say, oh, if this person can do it, I can do it, and reach out for questions. So the reason you shouldn't do an MBA should not be because the process is very difficult or it can be very challenging. Yes, you need to do an exam. You're a Nigerian trained lawyer. You have gone through the pressure of academics. So I believe it is something you can do. And each person is different. I think I prepared for my application. I used 12 months to prepare for my application. And I find classmates that use 2 months, that use 3 months. And I'm like, wow. But because I knew that my own peculiarities were different and I had to write an exam that required quantitative analysis, so the time I used to prepare was longer. And I think there was a question that also talked about how to prepare for the exam and all of that. There are tutors, there are a lot of help. Just once you know it is something you want to do, the reason why you shouldn't do it is because it is difficult. And I think I would just end with a quote I always say, and I also have it like imprinted in different places in my apartment. Whatever the heart of a man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Whatever you want to do, regardless of your grade. So for example, I was applying to HBS and they take the best of the best. Like my classmates are first class this, first class that. I didn't have a first class from anywhere. I didn't have a first class from law school. I didn't have a first class from Unilag. And I got into HBS, the only lawyer that got in from Africa. So I think whatever the heart of a man can conceive, if you believe it is something you want to do, then go for it. Thank you. So I'm also available if you have any questions, if you need help with how to navigate the process, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That is extremely inspiring. I think we've gone around the table apart from Bimi. So Bimi, in a minute, if you'd like to share your last final word.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's been a great privilege being on this panel. I mean, just like others said, aside being a panelist, I've learned so much. Like my jota is so full. I mean, it's been so much learning from all the words of experience of colleagues on the panel. So my final word to the participants is, first, tell your story passionately and make it compelling. Nobody can tell it like you do. Now, for all of this scholarship, be it admission funding, I'm all about how everyone can get this access, fully funded, partial funding. You have to still tell a story. So tell it passionately like no one will do, and make it compelling, such that you would ask yourself, if I read this story, if I was the scholarship committee or the funding committee, will I fund me? Will I fund myself? So ask yourself that question as you write your story. And two, which is the final point, apply for other scholarship. Apply for other scholarship. Like, for those applying for Shibnin, don't just leave it to only Shibnin. Apply for others. Like, there's this cushioning effect it gives you whatever happens. And prepare for rejection. And when I mean prepare for rejection, don't see it in that light as rejection. See it as a redirection. My first attempt at Shibnin, even though I made it to the finals, I was selected, but I still didn't get in. Yes, I felt very bad about it. I was down, but then I saw it as a redirection. If you ask me in retrospect today, that am I grateful that I got that second one and I didn't get, I will tell you yes. Why? Because of what happened afterwards. Because if I had gone the previous year, I would have gone to a school that wasn't really the school I wanted. But I'm glad what this journey at UCL has led me into in terms of the next phase of my career, which I'm preparing for at this point. So don't see rejection as, oh, I'm done, I'm no more interested in all of this scholarship, let me just remain as I am. No, see it as a redirection and keep applying. Apply for others. So thank you so much. So feel free to reach out to me, and please submit, keep preparing, just like every other person has been saying. Preparation, what distinguishes the best people who get those scholarships at times is not people who have made the most impact, who have the most amazing leadership experience. It's about those who are able to prepare well and tell their story, connecting the past to the present and to the future that they aspire to get to. Thank you very much for the organizers. Thank you, Caleb and team. Thank you. This is so a wonderful program, and I would want to say well done, and congratulations once again. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just say one?
Yes, I'm sorry, Gregory. Ike is speaking.
Okay, and I wanted to point out, I don't think we've heard also from MNEK, if it's still on. I don't think we've had like final comments from MNEK, so please, other speakers should please chip in with their final comments. Thank you, and sorry for interrupting, Ike.
No problem. You're good. Okay, please. I just want to leave with this. I want to tell everyone, okay, first of all, let me start by appreciating the effort. I mean, you guys are doing a wonderful job. Everybody has across the bridge. You know, you're just doing a wonderful job saving lives and giving people clarity and direction. I'm so grateful for the opportunity you guys gave me to be here today to speak and also to learn. I mean, I've learned a lot. Not just saying, I've learned a lot from people, you know, trying to hear from people personal experience and life trajectories. However, I just want to leave with everybody, every lawyer or every law student who is here, who is planning on going for his graduate study. I just want to tell you that, leave you with the greatest things of this life are on the other side of fear. You don't just have to have it all figured out before you take that first step. You know, some of the movements, some of the journeys get clearer while you are on the journey. So don't wait until you have it all sorted out, all figured out before you take that first step. It's just like climbing the staircase. You will not see the top of the stair while you are on the last rung, but it gets clearer while you're on the movement. So, and also lastly, but not the least, I will tell people is the place of grace. I don't know whatever you believe in. I don't know what, but I know that the fact that most of us are classmates, schoolmates, age mates, whatever mate does not make us grace mates. So while we are at it, just pray for God's grace, and that's it. I wish you the best of luck in whatever you guys are doing. I mean, there are so many rooms, enough room to accommodate all of us. Feel free to reach out to me. Like, I'm not on Facebook, but you can just always see me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or even Instagram. If there's any question you just want to ask and you need clarification, guidance, and when you are doing all those things, I'm here to help. And I'll always tell you, while you are in this process, don't assume anything. No matter how trivial you think it is, seek clarification. Don't assume anything. I'll always be here to help. If there's any way I can help you. Thank you and God bless you. See you guys at the top.
Thank you so much, Ike. That is amazing. Thank you to everyone. Eminike, I don't think Eminike is still on this call, Greg. He may have dropped
Yeah,
off.
I think
Yes.
Yeah, and we didn't notice that.
So I think this is an awesome place to end things, and we would like to say thank you. Thank you to all our organizers. Thank you, Greg, for being an amazing host. Thank you to all our panelists. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you to our logistics team and our other teams as well for making today a success. So with that, we have come to the end of today's session, but we have a few announcements that we would like to share with you before we all drop off. If you enjoyed this session and you think you would, your friends or family would find it helpful, or you'd like to come back to it, this event will be available on YouTube. The name of the channel is Caleb Adebayo, so you can go there to watch it again or to share it with your friends and family or whoever you think will find it helpful. Also, there is a video titled 7 Steps for Getting into Top American Universities on the same channel, on Caleb Adebayo's channel, for those who want additional guidance for the application process. So you can just head over there and watch it, and you can connect to our amazing panelists if you would need some further clarification on certain things, or you just generally need guidance. And finally, Hands and Bridges will soon be commencing another year with the incoming set of law school students next month. So we will appreciate volunteer mentors and buddies when we make the open call. So for the participants, please look out for our open call as we will be taking new members soon. So with that, I'd like to say thank you. Once again, thank you for your time and your patience. It's been an amazing 3 hours. So thank you to everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Have a lovely evening.
Yeah. Bye.
Your love.